You aren't born a citizen in the Accretion Empire. You are forged into a weapon. In the distant future, Earth is nothing more than a burning memory. The survivors fled across the stars, settling on a hostile rock called Novus. Resources are scarce. Mercy does not exist. And to maintain absolute dominance, the military drafts literal children to fight their wars. Enter Luca, a kid from the lower sector slums with zero financial backing and zero family ties. For his final evaluation, he is locked in a room with 5 cybernetic death row inmates. These guys are seasoned killers, but they are about to learn a terrifying lesson. Luca does not fight like a trainee. He moves with the precision of a machine and the ferocity of a starved animal. He slips through their blind spots, bypassing their heavy artillery and closing the distance before they can blink. He tears through the squad, leaving nothing but severed limbs. A flawless execution, done in under 10 seconds. The commander watches from the observation deck, smiling like he just struck gold. But not everyone is thrilled. Meet Ile Karthika, a blonde, blue-eyed aristocrat possessing both raw power and a massive ego. He watches the slum kid's performance and marks him as his only real competition. He confronts Luca in the barracks, analyzing his mechanical right eye, trying to figure out what makes an orphan so lethal. Ile claims that guys like them are destined to climb to the top of the food chain for the glory of the Empire. But Luca knows the odds are stacked against him. He does not have a fancy bloodline or millions of credits for top-tier augmentations. When Ile visits him, he offers a high-grade painkiller module, a gift to help him sleep through the agony of his implants. Luca rejects it. He refuses to dull his senses. Relying on comfort makes you weak, and weakness gets you killed. To prove he is not a one-trick brawler, Luca steps up to the firing range. He runs the ballistic simulations, aiming at the high-speed targets. The noble kid expects him to struggle. Instead, Luca maintains a dead calm expression while his eye calculates wind, distance, and recoil. He puts every single round through the exact same hole, leaving the aristocrats speechless. But training wheels come off fast in this military. Commander Hamilla steps up to the podium, dropping a harsh reality check on the recruits. Across the gorge, a Korite Alliance outpost has been stationed in their territory. This is their first live fire exercise. The target is a hostile settlement. Ile views the Korites as religious fanatics. The objective is straightforward. The Empire does not negotiate. Take no prisoners. Kill them all. Ile smirks, unfazed by the prospect of murder. But for Luca, staring down at the enemy encampment, the weight of taking a human life is about to test everything he believes in. Because in the Accretion Empire, mercy is just another word for suicide. The platoon descends into the burning Korite settlement. The air reeks of smoke and the screams of the dying. The Accretion forces sweep through the camp with methodical, ruthless efficiency. This is not a battle. This is an extermination. Luca stalks through the flames, his blade drawn. His momentum halts when he spots his next target. It isn't a soldier. It is a terrified child, curled up against a stone pillar, crying for their mother. For a split second, the hardened trainee freezes. All the indoctrination about the enemy being faceless monsters shatters when he looks at a kid clutching their face in pure terror. His mind flashes back to the commander's order: leave no survivors. The Empire demands absolute loyalty, and hesitation is a court-martial offense. He grips his sword, trying to force his cybernetic limbs to move. He attempts to convince himself that this child is an insect sapping the Empire's resources. His humanity screams at him to stop. He whispers for the kid to play dead, hoping to spare a single life in this massacre. The ground beneath them erupts. A flash of blue energy rips through the settlement, or sending shockwaves through the smoke. Luca looks up to see a massive cloaked figure standing atop a water tower. The air crackles with unfiltered magical energy. It is a Korite Force user. The man is livid that his people are being slaughtered like livestock. He raises a single hand. Without any technology or firearms, he bends the space around him. This is the power of the arcane, the magic that the mechanically obsessed Accretians despise and fear. He unleashes a devastating blast. Luca registers the attack a fraction of a second before the world turns white. When the dust settles, the cadet realizes he isn't dead. Ile threw himself into the line of fire, taking the brunt of the kinetic shockwave. The blonde noble is buried under the rubble, his cybernetic arm severed from his torso. He coughs up blood, eyes ordering his rival to handle the enemy while he recovers. Guilt crashes over the orphan. His moment of hesitation cost his friend an arm, and nearly their lives. He draws his blade and rockets toward the Force user. There will be no more hesitation. He analyzes the enemy's movements. To use magic, the Korite needs to perform preparatory hand signs. That creates a microscopic window. Luca exploits that gap, slicing through the smoke and aiming for the man's throat. The magic user is a seasoned veteran. He drops his hood, his eyes glowing with ethereal power, and prepares to counter. He realizes a battle of attrition will destroy his physical body, so he pours every ounce of remaining aura into a blinding blast of light. Luca intercepts the strike. His mechanical arm catches the brunt of the magical energy, the metal screaming under the thermal load. The sheer force of the collision tears through the cadet's armor, shattering his visor and exposing his human eye to the blistering heat. The Korite collapses, blood pouring from from his mouth. He looks up at the boy who defeated him, realizing with horror that this monstrous killer is a child. Luca stands over the dying man, panting heavy breaths. His armor is scorched, his body aching, but he won. The magic user questions why the boy spared the child earlier. Why show mercy if he is an imperial dog? The orphan's face goes cold. He states that his mercy was a mistake, a flaw in his programming that he is actively erasing. He brings his boot down, executing the man without a second thought. The mission is complete. Back at base, the two cadets are stuffed into recovery tanks. The liquid is freezing. He was designed to accelerate tissue regeneration. Ile floats in the adjacent tube, laughing about his missing limbs. The noble treats getting blown up like a minor inconvenience, boasting about the titanium upgrades he is getting out of the deal. He suspects the entire mission was a setup. The commanders knew there was a force user in that settlement and sent the rookies in as bait to test them. Luca stews in his own anger. He realizes that sparing the enemy was a childish fantasy. In this universe, weakness equals death. The orphan glares at his friend, annoyed that the aristocrat still has the energy to smile after getting mangled. A few months pass and their bodies are rebuilt. Commander Hamilis addresses the surviving recruits, acknowledging Luca and Ile as the top two performers in their batch, and he dangles the ultimate carrot in front of them, the rank of Centurion. The Imperial Guard hierarchy is brutal but simple. 1,000 guardsmen spread across 10 centuries. New full-body cyborgs start at the bottom in the 10th century. The goal is to climb the ladder, crushing anyone in the way. To prove who deserves the top spot, Luca and Ile face off in the sparring ring. It is a high-speed clash of metal and martial arts. The two prodigies exchange blows that would snap a normal human in half. Ile's new titanium arm gives him a massive power boost. The noble throws a devastating kick, aiming to end the match. Luca ducks under the strike, his combat eye tracking the trajectory with flawless precision. He counters with a piston-driven punch, stopping an inch from the noble's face. Another victory for the street rat. Later that night, they sit on the facility roof. Ile admits he thought the new upgrades would secure him the win, but Luca's combat instincts are evolving faster than machinery. The noble tells his rival to relax. He has a guaranteed spot in the guard now. His slum days are over. The blonde kid confesses his true desire. He does not want to be a soldier. He wants to be a scholar and study the ancient arcane civilizations scattered across the planet. Luca thinks this is rich, coming from a spoiled noble. Kids in the lower sector kill each other for scraps, and this guy complains about his guaranteed military career. Ile smiles, trusting his friend with his secret. In an empire that forbids arcane study, admitting this is literal treason. The orphan insists he is loyal to the emperor because the empire gave him power. He views enemies of the state as his personal enemies. The noble stands up, stretching his metallic limbs. He tells Luca not to push himself into an early grave. Year 3 hits, and the stakes rise. The squad is deployed on a reconnaissance mission into an uncharted neutral zone. They push through the dense forest and discover an arcane site, a monolithic structure glowing with ancient energy. Ile is ecstatic. His inner archaeologist is geeking out over the ruins that predate human history. Luca stays on edge. The Empire does not send cadets to sightsee. If there is an artifact, there is danger. A fellow cadet, Claude Ramones, steps up. He is from a prestigious family and wants to prove his worth. Claude tries to play matchmaker, offering to introduce Luca to his younger sister. The kid is desperate to secure a political alliance with the top trainee. The street rat shuts him down. He has zero interest in noble politics or blind dates. The banter dies. Luca's mechanical eye registers a massive energy spike emerging from the ruins. A Korit paladin steps out of the light, clad in silver armor, radiating an aura of pure destructive magic. He summons a spear of blue energy. It hums with the kind of power that makes modern firearms look like toys. Before anyone can raise a weapon, the paladin throws the spear. It rips straight through Claude's chest. Luca's blood freezes. He watches the boy who wanted to introduce his sister get bisected in the blink of an eye. The system crashes. The combat eye throws infinite error screens, unable to calculate the arcane physics of the attack. Panic sets in. Ile takes command, ordering the squad to lay down covering fire while he and Luca engage the target. They unload their rifles, but the paladin deflects the barrage with his energy blade. Running is a death sentence. The monster is too fast. The Korit summons another massive spear, intending to wipe the rest of the squad off the map. The beam carves a glowing trench through the earth, turning dirt and metal into slag. Luca counts the milliseconds. He knows he has a microscopic window before the enemy attacks again. He fires his thrusters, launching himself straight at the paladin in a desperate bid to close the distance. He strikes the energy shield. The impact feels like punching a mountain, shattering the ground beneath his boots. Ile joins the assault. The two prodigies unleash a coordinated flurry of strikes, pushing their cybernetics to the absolute limit. The paladin swings his greatsword. Luca barely blocks it, the sheer weight of the blow forcing him to his knees. Ile uses his arm cannons, blasting the enemy point blank to break his posture. The resulting shockwave clears the forest canopy, vaporizing the surrounding trees. Unfazed, the paladin launches himself into the sky, charging a massive area of effect attack. He crashes crashes down like a meteor. The kinetic force sends Luca skidding across the dirt, his metal joints screaming under the pressure. A colossal explosion engulfs the zone. The magical firepower is on a different level than their standard issue gear. When the smoke clears, the paladin stands tall, not a single scratch on his white armor. He raises his weapon to finish the execution. The sky darkens as a massive shadow falls over the battlefield. A legion drops from orbit. It is a towering suit of black mechanical armor, the pinnacle of Accretion engineering, a walking engine of death piloted by a guard who surrendered his humanity for power. The black giant draws a massive broadsword. The paladin senses a real threat and readies his spear. The two titans collide. The shockwave of steel meeting magic cracks the bedrock for miles. The legion strikes with terrifying speed, slicing through the paladin's force shield like wet tissue paper. The Korite fires a concentrated energy blast, but the black armor absorbs the heat and keeps marching forward. The mechanical beast overwhelms the knight. It brings a massive fist down, crushing the paladin into the earth. It follows up with a brutal stomp, but shattering the silver chestplate and pinning the magic user to the dirt. Realizing he is outmatched, the paladin channels every ounce of his remaining aura for a suicide strike. He fires a blind, desperate beam of energy right at the wounded cadets. Luca is caught in the crosshairs. He cannot dodge. The beam tears through his midsection, vaporizing his lower half in a blinding flash of heat. He hits the ground hard. His vision blurs. He feels the cold earth and knows this is the end of the line. The legion stomps over his bisected body. The guard inside praises the trainee for surviving this long. This is the grim reality of the armor. It requires the surgical removal of all unnecessary organs to pilot. Ultimate power requires ultimate sacrifice. The pilot does not care about the collateral damage. He turns back to confirm the kill on the paladin. The orphan stares at his ruined body. The cold creeps in, replacing the adrenaline. He realizes he was nothing but a fragile insect in a battle of gods. He wakes up. He is not dead. The Empire dragged his top half back to the medical bay. Floating in a recovery tank, he stares at the sterile ceiling, listening to the hum of life support. Eli is in the adjacent tube, joking about getting top-of-the-line military upgrades out of the ordeal. The guy is cheerful for someone who got mangled again. Luca is furious. The vast gap in power between him and the elite warriors cannot be crossed with hard work alone. The feeling of being pathetic burns inside him. He wants to be a monster like the Legion, but right now, he is a broken toy awaiting repairs. The dream of becoming an elite guard feels like a joke when a single magic user can turn him into a torso. He realizes the Empire views them as disposable meat shields, meant to stall until the real weapons arrive. Once he gets his new mechanical legs installed, he sits in the waiting room reading up on advanced combat theories. He flips through a catalog of cybernetics, looking for anything that will give him an edge. The higher-ups are investigating the Corran Paladin encounter. They are hiding facts, and the cadet knows it. Eli returns from an interrogation. The military brass is terrified of the ancient artifact they uncovered in the ruins. The noble suspects the factions are gearing up for a full-scale war over the technology. The power scaling of this universe is becoming clear, and Luca refuses to be left behind. He finds himself in the visiting room, a sanctuary of green grass and sunlight built inside the sterile metal base to appease the noble families. A girl approaches him, Lillian Ramones, Claude's older sister. She boasts striking white hair and a dangerous mix of grief and ambition. She slides a cup of tea across the table. She is here to turn her brother's death into a political advantage. The noblewoman gets to the point. She wants to form an alliance. She offers a marriage arrangement. A union with her powerful family would give the orphan the backing and resources he lacks. The Ramones family wants a prodigy to replace the son they lost. The survivor of the Paladin encounter fits the bill. Luca turns her down. He knows that taking a shortcut through a noble family means he will always be their attack dog. He stares her down. He refuses to be a replacement part for her family tree. The cadet walks out, leaving the aristocrat to sip her tea alone. Lillian is taken aback but respects his stubbornness. She promises to keep bothering him. Luca finds her irritating. He heads straight for the physical training ward, the only place that makes sense to him. Seeking true strength, Luca tracks down instructor Kinyuan. This guy is a retired elite, sporting long hair and a laid-back attitude that hides his lethal skills. The veteran uses fewer cybernetics than the recruits, relying instead on a terrifying mastery of combat physics. Luca demands a spar. He wants to see the technique Kinyuan uses, the one that makes him so dangerous despite his minimal hardware. Kinyuan agrees. The street rat charges in, throwing a high-speed punch with his upgraded titanium arm. The instructor barely moves, shifting his weight a fraction of an inch to let the strike slide past. He shifts his body and uses the attacker's own kinetic energy against him, redirecting the massive force. Luca tries to follow up with a leg sweep, but the veteran is already inside his guard. A palm strike to the chest sends the recruit airborne, his internal dampeners screaming in protest. He is sent flying across the room, crashing into the wall. His brain feels like it bounced around inside his skull. He hits the ground, gasping for air. The kinetic feedback feels like his brain is boiling in battery acid. His vision spins. The feedback from the kinetic transfer messes with his mechanical eye and his nervous system. Kinuan stands over him, not even out of breath. He did not overpower the kid, he outcalculated him. The instructor explains the technique. It is called Archi's Victima. It uses the human brain as a supercomputer to calculate and redirect force. The catch is severe. Using the brain to process that much raw combat data causes massive neurological damage over time. It is a fast track to brain death. Luca does not blink. He tells the instructor he will take the risk. If it makes him stronger, he will pay the price. The veteran knocks him down again to prove a point. He warns his student to anticipate an attack from any angle at any time. Kinuan smirks. He likes a kid with a death wish. A month passes. Luca spars with Kinuan every day. He takes endless beatings, his nose bleeding from the mental strain, but he refuses to quit. The days blur into an endless cycle of concussions, vomiting, and sensory overload. Ile visits him, but he mentions that some idiots in the military are plotting a rebellion against the current leadership. The aristocrat looks worried. The rebellion rumors are growing louder, and his friend is pushing himself into an early grave with this forbidden training. Luca grabs Ile by the collar. He warns him to stay far away from treason. The Empire kills traitors without a second thought. He tells his friend not to do anything stupid. The military will crush them if they step out of line. Ile changes the subject, dragging his rival out of the base to clear his head. To blow off steam, they head down to the lower sector. It is a slum powered by thermal magma, filled with smog and desperate people. The lower sector is a stark reminder of what they are fighting to escape. A grim look at the bottom of the food chain. Luca stares at the trash-filled streets. He remembers crawling out of this hellhole. He vows to keep pushing his mind and body until he reaches the peak, no matter how many pieces of himself he has to replace. Kinuan leads his student deep into the smog-choked underbelly of the lower sector. The retired instructor navigates the neon-lit maze of the black market like he owns it. Luca follows quietly. He wonders why his master ordered him to equip outdated, low-energy prosthetic limbs for this trip. Their path is blocked by hired muscle. Kinuan politely asks to see Aleph, the boss of the establishment. The guard's response is to shove a massive hand cannon directly into the old man's face. That was a fatal miscalculation. Kinuan shatters the man's posture before the neural signal to pull the trigger even reaches his finger. The second guard goes down just as fast. Luca pins the third man to the floor, seamlessly syncing with his master's violent rhythm. Kinuan smiles warmly, having negotiated their entry. He tosses the heavy pistols onto the concrete to make his point clear. They arrive at a massive fortified dome, the Colosseum, the most dangerous underground fighting ring in the Accretion Empire. Inside the VIP suite, Aleph sits on his throne, smoking a cigar. Kinuan skips the pleasantries and demands his student be put into the next match. Aleph flicks his ash, unbothered by the intrusion. His guards draw their weapons, leveling laser sights directly at the intruders' heads. The boss laughs, explaining that they only let them in because this room is designed for disposing of corpses. Luca calls his bluff without a shred of fear. If the boss actually wanted them dead, the 5 guns trained on them would have fired already. His mind accelerates into the hyper-focused state of Archi's combat, mapping every threat in the room. Kinuan brings up Tora, the previous owner of the Colosseum whom Aleph murdered to take over. The boss presses a gun directly against Kinuan's temple. The old man does not flinch. He promises that if Aleph pulls the trigger, he will be joining Tora in hell. Aleph sweats, lowering the weapon. He recognizes a predator. He agrees to the match, but warns them that putting a kid with organic limbs into the ring is murder. To sweeten the deal, Kinuan wagers the access code to Tora's hidden safe. Aleph takes the bait instantly. Luca realizes his master just completely dominated the room's power dynamic without throwing a single punch. Down in the waiting room, the speaker announces the slaughter show begins in 2 hours. Kinuan slides a datapad across the bench, revealing the boy's opponent, Gabriel, the Steel Fist, a hulking mass of illegal modifications who disregards his own lifespan for power. Kinuan reminds his student of the fundamental philosophy of Archi's Victima. To be satisfied with what you have is to lose. Water does not lose, it simply changes form. The instructor took Luca in because he saw the raw potential to adapt to anything. The lift rises into the blinding lights of the underground arena. The crowd's reaction is visceral. They absolutely despise him. They paid to see a bloodbath, and this unmodded kid looks like a complete waste of time. Luca stands in the center of the ring, feeling the suffocating desire of the audience pressing down on him. He smirks. This feels exactly like home. He remembers the orphanage, the reality where the strong eat and the weak suffer. He survived that hell by completely ignoring the cries of losers. The cadet is not about to start listening to them now. Gabriel stomps into the arena, casting a massive shadow. The giant is deeply insulted by the matchup. Luca's combat eye dissects the threat instantly. The cyborg's limbs are asymmetrical, causing his spine to literally curve under the weight of his own upgrades. He is a physical mess, but his raw destructive power is undeniable. Gabriel leans in, offering to let the kid live if he serves as a slave. Luca fires back that Gabriel will need a servant after he gets crippled today. The giant's mechanical eye twitches. The disrespect hits hard. He vows to bash the boy into the floor until nothing remains. Up in the VIP box, Kinuan watches carefully. The real test begins now. Luca knows his body is entirely organic right now. A single direct hit will kill him instantly. Gabriel Gabriel launches a colossal hammer fist that craters the arena floor. Luca blurs out of the impact zone, slipping the strike by a fraction of an inch. The brute is baffled by the speed. Luca analyzes the kinetic force. With combat parts, he would have tried to block and been ripped in half. He retaliates with a high kick to the giant's face. The ring is too small to play tag. He has to engage. Gabriel swings wide, his massive arms turning the quadrant into a lethal zone. The crowd screams for blood. The sheer volume of attacks leaves no room for error. Praying for a better weapon will not make one drop from the ceiling. He has to fight with the absolute limits of his current form. Arki's combat is not about overpowering the enemy with brute strength. It is about complete tactical acceptance. Gabriel's attacks are heavy cannons. The small tremors in his shoulder act as the trigger. The direction of his gaze is the barrel, and the length of his arm is the range. Kinuan grins in the stands. The boy is adapting. Luca's eyes track the micro-movements, breaking the giant's rhythm into predictable math. Gabriel lunges forward, furious. Luca's concentration reaches absolute peak. Time slows down. He executes a flawless backflip over a lethal swing. He plants his boot directly onto the cyborg's extended arm. Using the giant's massive momentum as a springboard, Gabriel looks up, realizing too late what is happening. Luca delivers a devastating downward heel kick right into the neck joint. He laughs, the adrenaline of the kill-or-be-killed world flooding his veins. Gabriel drops to one knee. The brute swings wildly, desperate to land a single hit. Luca grins right in his face. The giant's fist obliterates the wall behind him, completely missing. Luca knows he lacks pure stopping power. He makes up for it with lethal precision. He shifts his weight and drives his foot into the cyborg's exposed cranial plating. Gabriel's massive frame crashes into the arena floor. The quiet kid lands gracefully, his breathing perfectly steady. The crowd goes dead silent. They are staring at a mathematical impossibility. Because this is a controlled environment, predicting the brute's moves was terrifyingly easy. Luca walks back through the tunnel, forced to admit the truth. Kinuan is a genius teacher. The old man greets him at the door, welcoming him to the true nature of Arki's victima. Instead of praise, Kinuan tosses him a small data drive. Luca asks if it is the payout for the match. Kinuan laughs. It is the credit chips to pay for Gabriel's hospital bills. Luca glares at him. He wants to be a ruthless soldier, not a charity worker. Kinuan taps his forehead, calling his student hopelessly naive. Showing generosity is not charity. It is an investment. Creating an advantageous environment for oneself is the true mark of an elite operator. Luca realizes he completely misjudged the old man's intentions. Deep in the medical ward, a doctor scans Gabriel's shattered cybernetics. The outdated parts are drawing too much power, causing dangerous system freezes. Gabriel screams at the doctor, convinced he is being scammed for more money. The physician calmly explains that normal people do not walk around with heavy military modifications. He recommends the highly expensive Hyper-Lindell model to fix the neural load. Gabriel curses, knowing he can only afford cheap, used parts on his budget. The door slides open. Luca walks in. The giant's mechanical eye flares with absolute rage. He vows to rip the kid apart. Luca leans in close, totally unbothered by the threat. He admits his trash talk in the arena was just a reflex. He tosses the stack of credit chips onto the bed. The doctor confirms it is more than enough to cover the Hyper-Lindell upgrades. Gabriel is stunned into silence. Luca tells him he just felt like paying the bill. The cyborg asks if this is the mercy of the victor. He demands to know his real name. Gabriel promises to repay the debt, his pride shifting into fierce loyalty. Luca walks out, realizing that making calculated investments actually feels incredibly powerful. Back at the Accretion physical training grounds, Luca tests his newly evolved combat logic against Ile. He lands a flawless sweep, putting the noble face down on the mat. Ile groans, wiping sweat from his brow, realizing the massive gap in their skill. He complains that Arki's victima looks like dirty street fighting. Luca ignores him. His entire foundation of combat was shattered in the Colosseum. Every technique he ever learned has been condensed into a single drop of pure insight. Ile asks for a private moment to talk. In the barracks visiting room, Lillian Ramones is waiting for them. She demands to know why Luca has been actively avoiding her family. He tells her bluntly that he is simply not interested. Ile tries to intervene, but Luca snaps at him to shut up. Lillian's eyes narrow. The rejection burns her pride. Luca explains he has no time to play house with a noblewoman. A kid from the orphanage has no safety net if he loses his footing. Relying on a powerful family means he could lose everything on a whim. Ile argues that Luca interacts with him just fine, despite his noble blood. Luca stays perfectly cold, refusing to bend. He leaves his cup on the table and tells her to never visit him again. He walks out, leaving Lillian in stunned silence. Ile chases him down the hallway, complaining that he was unnecessarily harsh. Luca knows that if he showed even a sliver of kindness, she would have clung to him forever. He suspects the Ramones family is scheming something dangerous. Ile thinks he is just being paranoid. Luca turns the tables, asking if Ile actually has feelings for her. Ile panics, his pulse spiking as he stammers out a denial. Luca's amplified Arki's insight reads the noble's biological reactions like an open book. He tells his rival to cut the nonsense and shoot his own shot. The training shifts from physical combat to intense mental conditioning. Kinuan tests his student, asking how he would have resolved the shootout in Alepht's office. Luca runs the simulation. simulation, unarmed, completely surrounded by gunmen. He admits he would have ducked under the table to avoid the initial volley. Alep's crew had all the guns and the high ground. Kinuan points out that hiding means surrendering the initiative to attack. Taking a hostage would only end with both of them getting shot. The mental simulation shows Luca being ripped apart by laser fire. Kinuan reveals his own path: take them down instantly and escape through the hidden passage. Luca is shocked. The old man mapped a secret escape route before the fight even started. This is the true power of Archi's Victima, using all brain resources to amplify absolute insight, but the neurological toll is devastating. Luca suddenly pieces together the horrifying truth. The Legion armor, the ultimate full-body weapon of the Imperial Guard, requires massive bandwidth. It consumes every ounce of the pilot's neural resources just to function, meaning Archi's Victima cannot possibly be used while wearing the Legion armor. Kinuan smiles warmly, congratulating his student on figuring it out. He tells Luca to come back when he accepts this reality. Luca walks away in absolute disgust, furious that he wasted his time on a dead-end philosophy. 3 months pass. Luca reports to the Chief Centurion's office. Commander Hylas addresses the boy, noting his long absence from official duties. Luca claims he has been training independently while waiting for a mission. Hylas nods, acknowledging that Luca's skills are already beyond that of a standard trainee. Then the commander drops the hammer. He knows about Kinuan. The military brass has been watching everything: the black market, the Colosseum, the private lessons. Hylas knows Luca quit the training. The commander explains that Kinuan deliberately pushes away those without talent. Those with true talent eventually realize the Legion conflict and leave on their own. Hylas gives him a direct, undeniable order: go back and continue learning Archi's Victima. Luca realizes the Chief Centurion is deeply suspicious of the retired veteran and wants a spy on the inside. He accepts the order, knowing that refusal means immediate execution. Hylas praises the boy's ambition. He knows a survivor when he sees one. Back into the smog of the lower sector, Kinuan is waiting in a junk shop. He welcomes his student back immediately. Luca is deeply unsettled by how easy the old man made it. Kinuan stares at a massive pile of discarded mechanical toys. He tells the shop owner to pack up every single one of them. Luca is baffled by the ridiculous and expensive purchase. They carry the massive crates through the slums and arrive at the gates of the 47th orphanage. Kinuan orders him to drop the box in the courtyard and take a break. Gabriel stomps out of the shadows carrying a stack of crates like a massive forklift. The giant complains about being treated like a delivery boy. Luca smirks, clarifying that he never needed the cyborg's help in a real fight anyway. Gabriel's new spinal implants have drastically improved his balance. The hospital money was a massive success. Gabriel asks who the mysterious old man in the coat really is. Luca figures it out. Kinuan grew up in this exact orphanage. The slum kids swarm the crates, laughing and fighting over the mechanical toys. They call Gabriel an ugly guy, but he happily hands over the goods. 2 kids start bickering over a specific toy. The bigger kid violently shoves the smaller one to the dirt to steal it. Luca watches the brutal reality of the slums play out in miniature. Nothing is fair. Kinuan calls him over for a private talk. He explains that the orphanage principal is corrupt, smuggling most of the supplies to line his own pockets. The old man admits he just stops by occasionally to watch the kids survive. Luca stares at his master, noticing the terrifying toll the training has taken on him. Kinuan's cybernetic hand trembles uncontrollably. His nervous system is breaking down. The severe neurological damage from decades of Archi's combat has finally caught up to him. Luca cuts to the chase, his eyes glowing with dangerous intensity. He demands to know who ordered Kinuan to bring him back. He asks directly if Captain Hylas was pulling the strings. Kinuan's eyes flash, his terrifying insight locking onto his student's every micro-expression. Luca realizes he made a massive mistake. His own body language just betrayed his secrets. His mechanical hand clenches. If Kinuan is hiding treason, he might eliminate him right now. Kinuan tells him to calm down if he wants to live. The old man's smile returns, diffusing the murderous tension in an instant. He refuses to answer the question, claiming he is merely a loyal soldier of the Empire. Kinuan walks away, leaving his student in the dust. He praises Luca for being the ideal, unquestioning soldier the Empire seeks. Then he reveals the horrifying truth about Luca's recruitment. When Luca deflected the Paladin's magical attack without a processor, the military brass flagged him immediately. They intentionally orchestrated every event that led him to Kinuan's doorstep. Luca is horrified. He thought seeking power was his own choice. He thought he had free will. Kinuan delivers the hardest lesson of all. Every man is a slave to someone. The only difference is whether you accept it or remain ignorant. He tells Luca to run back and report everything to Hylas if he wants. Luca stands alone, his mind racing. He decides not to trust Kinuan's words completely. The Empire demands absolute loyalty, and he intends to survive. A drop of blood falls, dissolving entirely into the water. Inside the simulation training room, the pods hum with activity. Luca sits in the dark, unable to bring himself to report back to Hylas. If he did, they would run a full psychological evaluation to check for dangerous ideologies. The Empire executes anyone who shows even a hint of treason. He realizes Kinuan deliberately cornered him, knowing he would hesitate to squeal. To survive the upcoming psych exam, he needs to master his own mind. He opens the simulation communication pod to find Ilay inside. The noble is drenched in sweat from a brutal combat session. Ilay crushes a water bottle, exhausted but smiling. He compliments Luca on his relentless training schedule. Ilay asks for a private favor regarding his family. He admits the prestigious families rig the aptitude tests. Luca demands to know how Ilay bypassed the psychological portion. Ilay hesitates, knowing this borders on high treason. He confirms the room is empty and agrees to explain it. The secret is conscious personality fragmentation. You create a superficial ego to interact with the world, while your true ego observes from the inside. Ilay's eyes glow with terrifying intensity. He warns that acting the part too well can permanently erase who you truly are. He copied his father's unwavering loyalty to the emperor until the lie became real enough to pass the test. Luca is unsettled by the noble's absolute psychological control. He realizes he just needs to revert to his old self, the cold orphan who scored perfectly on the first exam. Ilay warns him again that messing with the brain's baseline is extremely dangerous. Luca smirks, finally understanding the noble a little better. The communication channel flashes. Bad timing. Back in the lower sector, the sky burns orange. Kinuan leads Luca into a heavily fortified gang building, completely uninvited. The old man notes the impressive security, treating the raid like a casual field trip. Luca feels sick, knowing Kinuan is pretending the orphanage conversation never happened. Kinuan gives him exactly 20 seconds to clear the room. Luca locks onto the target door. He shatters the electronic lock with a single punch. The heavy door swings open. 3 armed thugs and their leader are sitting around a poker table. The boss demands to know who just broke into his office. Luca's amplified insight maps the room instantly. He tracks the 4 men, plus a hostage hiding in the bathroom. The boss draws his gun, tired of the intrusion. Luca closes the distance before the thug can even aim. The men at the table freeze in absolute shock. Luca rips the massive hand cannon right out of the leader's grip. He unloads a brutal pistol whip across the man's jaw. The gun spins in the air as the boss collapses. Luca catches it flawlessly, racking the slide. He fires blinding suppression shots into the table, scattering the thugs. He pivots smoothly, taking absolute control of the geometry of the room. The boss tries to return fire with a backup weapon. Luca dodges the wild shots effortlessly. He aims down the sights, disgusted by their terrible accuracy. He kicks the bathroom door shut to protect the hostage from the crossfire. A final thug tries to ambush him with a stun baton. Luca does not even look at him. He points the hand cannon directly at the man's face, advising him to stay down. The stun baton powers down. The fight is over. Luca informs Kinuan that the room is clear, sensing the person in the toilet. He opens the door slowly. A woman is tied up on the floor, absolutely terrified. Kinuan praises the 12-second clear time. Luca asks why they couldn't just kill the thugs and be done with it. Kinuan reminds him that as outsiders, disrupting the gang ecosystem too much brings unwanted attention. Luca looks at the traumatized woman, disgusted by the world's absolute unfairness. He realizes he only seeks power, so he never ends up helpless on the floor like her. For the next few weeks, Kinuan pushes him into completely blind fights. The old man isn't teaching him how to punch. He's teaching him how to rapidly optimize chaos. Luca stands over another pile of unconscious bodies, his tactical processing evolving perfectly. They arrive at a local repair shop. Gilda, the mechanic they rescued, welcomes them with a bright smile. Kinuan orders his usual black coffee with oil. Luca realizes his master deliberately orchestrated her rescue to secure a skilled mechanic. She was kidnapped after a friend stole gang money, but thankfully her mind remained intact. Kinuan reveals he funded her education from the orphanage anonymously. The old man has been playing 4-dimensional chess this entire time. Gabriel stomps into the shop, fully repaired and acting as her personal bodyguard. The giant asks if Luca wants a beer. Gilda scolds him, reminding him that alcohol ruins neural pathways. Gabriel immediately backs down, terrified of his tiny mechanic. Luca sips his coffee, asking why Kinuan is provoking the local gang bosses. Gabriel confirms the bosses are organizing a hit squad to take Kinuan out. Kinuan casually announces they won't be able to visit the shop for a long time. Gilda is worried, asking how many years it might be. Luca realizes this might be a permanent goodbye. The military won't let him roam free forever. He looks at Gabriel and Gilda, an odd makeshift family surviving in the slums. Gilda smiles, hoping they return soon. Gabriel promises to keep taking risks to make money. Kinuan finishes his coffee, entirely unbothered by the death threats. He tells Luca not to pity them. They survive on their own strength now. Luca takes a sip of his bitter drink, accepting the cold reality of their world. Back at the Imperial base, the heavy doors of the Chief Centurion's office open. Luca reports everything he observed about Kinuan's peculiar activities. Hylas explains that during the early chaotic days of the Empire, impurities were accepted if they were useful. Kinuan was a Black Ops specialist, burying his records so deep even the commander cannot access them. Hylas confirms that Kinuan taking a genuine liking to Luca is extremely dangerous. The commander schedules Luca's psychological exam, warning him to prepare. Hylas lays out the brutal truth of the upcoming mission. Trainees sent on these suppression operations either die to keep a secret or rise to the top. Hylas hopes Luca survives to become the latter. Luca stays perfectly neutral, claiming he merely follows orders. Hylas smiles, promising that if Luca succeeds, he will officially adopt him into the Custoria family. The commander's eyes gleam with dangerous ambition. Luca is stunned. A noble name is the ultimate prize for a slum rat. The psychological exam begins. Luca sits in the scanning chair, the massive neural dome lowering over his head. The machine detects a spike in joy. Luca successfully buries his true thoughts, projecting the perfect image of a loyal soldier. A massive sparring session is underway. Ile throws a devastating hook. The impact ripples through the training room. Ile's mechanical limbs blur into a flurry of heavy strikes. He stands over his opponent, panting heavily. He dips his glowing cybernetic fingers into a cooling gel. Luca notes that the noble has practiced until his joints literally wore out. Ile asks if Luca passed the psych exam. Luca confirms he did, using Ile's dangerous method. The noble asks for his favor to be repaid soon. He promises to save Luca's life on the battlefield if things go wrong. Luca realizes Ile is planning something incredibly stupid regarding Lillian Ramones. With the chief centurion's trust secured, Luca's singular goal is to become an adopted noble. Hylas addresses the massive assembly of the Imperial Guard. A special military order has been issued to crush the rising rebellion. The rebel forces are led by 3 traitorous factions, spearheaded by the Ramones family. Ile and Luca exchange a heavy look. Lillian is officially an enemy of the state. The military base activates. Massive armored transports prepare for deployment. The soldiers march in perfect unison, a terrifying machine of war. The massive carriers hover out of the loading bays, shaking the concrete. Luca is officially designated as the platoon leader of the 21st Suppression Army. His squad of 27 veteran soldiers salutes him. He realizes the Empire is using this civil war as a brutal live-fire training exercise for the top recruits. His vice platoon leader, Sergeant Kodrak, is a hardened veteran who clearly despises taking orders from a teenager. The squad glares at him, waiting for the kid to make a mistake so they can ignore his commands. Luca considers his options. He could leave the tactical decisions to Kodrak and play it safe, but that would mean showing weakness. Luca asserts absolute dominance, staring Kodrak dead in the eye. He demands complete obedience, warning that any resistance will be crushed with lethal force. The veterans bristle, furious at the disrespect. Kodrak grabs Luca by the collar, demanding he show some respect for his elders. Luca breaks the hold effortlessly, his eyes glowing with unrestrained malice. He informs the sergeant that he grew up in the exact same slums they did, but he is standing in front of them as their commander because he is immensely superior in every measurable way. The sheer weight of Luca's presence forces Kodrak to back down. The squad realizes they aren't dealing with a sheltered trainee, they are dealing with a monster. Kodrak apologizes, officially recognizing the boy's authority. The power dynamic is set. Luca has taken absolute control. The target is locked, the arcane fortress currently occupied by the enemy. The massive Imperial carriers touch down miles from the fortress walls. Ile holds his head in his hands, stressed about the impending slaughter. Luca tells him to stop acting like a child in front of his subordinates. He reminds the noble that acting soft will only get him killed by his own men. The tactical briefing begins in the staging area. The rebels have fortified the ancient relic site, surrounding it with 2 heavy walls. A high-density force dome protects the inner sanctum, guarded by 5 arcane anti-air turrets. The 11th Armored Brigade will spearhead the assault to destroy the defenses. They will deploy the mass-produced Myrmidon full-body armor to tank the magical artillery. Operation commences in exactly 1 hour and 30 minutes. Luca and Ile stand alone in the loading bay. Ile jokes that they are just acting as support, so it should be a picnic. Luca calls him out on his forced optimism. Ile finally breaks, begging Luca to help him save Lillian. Luca aggressively refuses, warning him that siding with traitors means the Karthika family will burn too. Ile confesses that she was his first love, and he is willing to risk execution for her. Luca is disgusted by the sentimental weakness. He tells Ile to get a grip, warning him that trying to save her is suicide. He turns his back, officially severing himself from Ile's treasonous plan. Ile accepts the rejection, his face dark with desperate resolve. Luca knows the noble is going to try it anyway. Privately, Luca hopes Lillian dies in the initial bombardment, so Ile doesn't get the chance to throw his life away. He checks his gear, reminding himself that Imperial cybernetics can revive a soldier as long as the brain survives. Sergeant Kodrak approaches, asking for final orders. Luca tells him to follow his lead without hesitation. Kodrak reminds the boy that he has 10 years of combat experience. He isn't useless. Luca accepts the advice, building a fragile bridge of trust with his second-in-command. The sergeant nods, ready for war. The vanguard strikes. Massive artillery shells pound the glowing blue force barrier. The colossal Myrmidon armor suits drop from the carriers, shaking the earth as they land. The mechanical brigade charges forward into the magical crossfire. The red visors of the Myrmidons lock onto the arcane turrets. They commence a synchronized firing sequence. Blinding lasers erupt from their heavy cannons, striking the dome. The rebels return fire, unleashing massive waves of arcane energy that tear through the front lines. The magic bends around the force shields, creating a terrifying light show of death. Missiles rain down from the sky, detonating against the arcane barriers. A colossal beam of pure magic answers back, vaporizing an entire squad of infantry. A Myrmidon fires its thrusters, diving directly into the magical barrage. It unloads a continuous beam of thermal energy, right into the fortress wall. The arcane shield buckles under the sustained thermal load, shattering into a million pieces. The turrets instantly recalibrate, locking onto the mechanical giants. They unleash a volley of magical explosive rounds, engulfing the vanguard in fire. The concussive force tears armor plating from the accretion machines. The smoke clears, revealing the terrifying durability of the Empire's heavy units. Red eyes pierce through the dust. They have survived the direct hit. The Myrmidons charge their primary weapons for a retaliatory strike. A massive, concentrated beam of red energy fires directly at the central turret. The shot connects, melting the ancient arcane stone into slag. Another Myrmidon uses its heavy lance to physically impale a secondary defense tower. The magical defenses are being systematically dismantled by overwhelming mechanical brute force. The final turret detonates in a blinding sphere of blue light. The tactical monitors update instantly. The anti-air defenses have been neutralized. The armored brigade has successfully breached the outer wall in under a minute. Luca receives the command. It's time for the infantry to move in. The massive assault forces surge forward, pouring into the breach like a flood of black steel. The veterans in Luca's squad grin like maniacs. They live for the absolute chaos of the slaughter. Luca smiles too. The adrenaline rush is the only thing keeping him sane in this wicked world. The order is given. The 21st Suppression Platoon charges into the smoke. The rebel forces have abandoned the surface, retreating deep into the subterranean maze. The Empire intends to flush them out and leave no survivors. The underground tunnels stretch for hundreds of meters. The Imperial maps are dangerously outdated. Small skirmishes break out as the infantry clears the upper corridors. The rebels have intentionally narrowed the deeper entrances, making it impossible for the Myrmidons to follow. This is a pure infantry meat grinder now. Luca's squad stacks up at the entrance to the unmapped tunnels. Kodrak warns him that taking the lead in a blind maze is practically suicide. The traps will be lethal. Luca ignores the warning. He doesn't care if he takes a bullet. He stares into the dark corridor, his Archie's Victima insight already mapping the lethal geometry ahead. He orders the squad to follow him and step exactly where he steps. The veterans feel a chill up their spines, terrified of the boy's unnatural confidence. But Luca has no time to worry about his men shooting him in the back. He has a mission to complete. He needs to find Lillian Ramones in the dark and eliminate her before Ile gets there. Deep beneath the arcane fortress, the Imperial assault has splintered into complete chaos. The corridors are a meat grinder. A rational commander would hold his position and let the heavy infantry clear the path. But Luca isn't fighting alongside rational soldiers. He pushes the Archie's Victima combat method to its absolute limit, overriding his own biological safety protocols. Sight, hearing, touch, smell. He accelerates his perception to map the invisible geometry of the battlefield. His heart rate spikes dangerously, flooding his brain with glucose to sustain the massive neurological processing power. The strain is agonizing. Prolonged use of this method literally melts the brain. But right now, he has no choice. He moves like a shadow, clearing the path before his squad even registers the threats. The rebel forces are cut down in the dark, entirely unable to track the monster tearing through their defensive lines. He shatters their formations with surgical precision, leaving nothing but severed limbs and silence in his wake. The veterans follow behind him, genuinely stunned by the sheer efficiency of their teenage commander. Luca doesn't stop to celebrate. He orders them to keep moving. He is tracking a very specific scent through the cordite and blood. Sergeant Kodrak advises him to slow down, warning that they are outpacing the rest of the invasion force. It is a logical suggestion. Luca's brain is already screaming from the overload of the Archie's method. But the sound of heavy gunfire echoing from the deeper tunnels changes the math. There is only one person in this entire army who would push forward that recklessly: Ile Karthaika. The rebel barricade ahead is heavily fortified. The sergeant warns their shields won't last 3 seconds in that crossfire. Luca's cybernetic eye isolates the heavy weapon placements instantly. He waits for the exact millisecond more than half of the gunners drop their magazines to reload. Then he launches himself directly into the kill zone. He systematically dismantles their heavy gunners, stripping away the weapons that pose an actual threat to his armor. He rips a plasma rifle straight from a soldier's hands. It is a flawless, merciless execution of violence. The remaining rebels drop their weapons, begging for their lives. Kodrak steps up, ordering his men to restrain the survivors as the corridor is finally secured. But the bodies piled up at the end of the hall do not belong to the enemy. They are Accretion soldiers, Ile's platoon. Luca stares at the carnage. The noble sacrificed his entire squad, pushing them into a suicide charge just to buy himself time. The orphan's blood boils. This is the exact kind of emotional weakness that gets everyone killed. If he finds Lillian Ramones, he decides he will execute her on the spot. He has to save Ile from himself, even if it means his friend hates him for the rest of his life. Kodrak approaches, officially recognizing the boy's terrifying competence. But the veteran delivers a harsh truth. Luca is an exceptional killer, but a terrible commander. He broke through the obstacles relying entirely on his own capabilities, completely ignoring his men. Luca fires back that he only did it because the veterans were too slow to keep up. Kodrak doesn't flinch. He warns the boy that a day will come when he needs the help of those weaker than him. No one can remain the strongest forever. Luca absorbs the advice. He is arrogant, but he isn't stupid enough to ignore a valid tactical critique. He leaves the squad to handle the prisoners prisoners and sprints deeper into the ruins alone. The deeper he goes, the more corpses he finds. Nobles who picked up weapons to buy time for their families to evacuate. Ile was the first person Luca ever considered an equal, but right now, the blonde aristocrat is nothing more than a liability to the empire. Luca finds the remnants of the Ramones family guard, shattered on the floor. He interrogates a dying rebel, demanding to know which way the heiress fled. The man claims he doesn't know, but Luca's artificial eye tracks the microshift in his iris. He is lying. He pins the man down, applying agonizing pressure to his wounds. The rebel breaks, screaming that Ile is already down there, cutting through anyone in his path. Luca executes the man, granting him a quick death rather than letting the Imperial torturers find him. The cadet steps through the massive blast doors, entering the ancient heart of the ruins. The Grand Hall is a slaughterhouse. Luca realizes he can no longer avoid the ultimate question. What will he do if Ile has officially turned against the Empire? Standing in the center of the carnage is the golden boy of the Karthika family. Ile turns around, his armor drenched in blood. The remaining members of the Ramones family cower behind him. Lillian is right there. Luca makes his choice. He cannot overlook this incident. Ile draws his glowing red blade, stepping between the orphan and the aristocrat. Luca promises to beat some sense into his friend. He runs the combat logic. He knows he can win a protracted fight, but the variables are too high. Ile just needs to stall long enough for the Ramones family to escape. To prevent that, Luca decides to simply bypass his friend and kill the VIPs first. He fires his thrusters, lunging straight for the terrified nobles. Ile intercepts with a point-blank concussive shot, forcing Luca to abort the strike. The impact sends the dark-haired cadet skidding across the marble floor. The two friends collide, their blades sparking in the dim light of the ruins. Luca deflects a heavy downward swing. The kinetic force cracks the ancient tiles beneath his boots. He pivots flawlessly, slipping past the noble's guard. He aims a lethal thrust right at the patriarch of the Ramones family. Lillian screams, throwing herself in front of the blade to protect her father. Luca does not hesitate. He prepares to cut her down, but Ile screams his name, his voice cracking with absolute desperation. Luca halts his blade a fraction of an inch from the heiress's throat. He looks down at the girl who once offered him a political marriage. Ile drops to his knees, begging his friend to stop. He knows they are both committing treason right now. Lillian steps forward, clutching the blonde noble's shoulder. She drops the bombshell. Her family never intended to rebel against the Empire. She holds up a glowing, perfectly cubic gemstone, an arcane relic. The Empire didn't order this slaughter to crush a rebellion. They ordered it to seize the ancient technology her father discovered. Ile realizes he has thrown his life away for a lie manufactured by the military brass. Lillian offers a compromise that benefits all of them. The relic can activate a hidden teleportation network within the ruins. She promises that if Luca lets them leave, she will disappear from the Empire forever. Luca takes the glowing cube, his mind racing through the tactical implications. Only the direct lineage of the Ramones family knows how to operate the route. If the Empire finds out Ile helped them escape, the Karthika family will be entirely purged. Luca realizes the only way to protect his friend is to stage a complete cover-up. He tells Ile to stay out of his way. If the teleporter fails, he will execute Lillian himself. The three of them descend into the deepest, unmapped sector of the ruins. Ile gently wipes the dirt from Lillian's face, a rare moment of tenderness in a fortress of death. The heiress cries, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the slaughter her family just endured. She admits that Ile's presence is the only thing keeping her sane. Luca watches them, his mechanical eye recording the undeniable truth. Ile genuinely loves this girl, and his dissenting ideals are a direct threat to his survival. They arrive at the hidden chamber. The massive teleportation gate hums with dormant energy. Lillian places the relic into the central console. She begs Ile to come with her, to leave the brutal military hierarchy and live quietly in the border city. Ile looks down. He can't. He is an Imperial guard. He has a duty, even if it is built on blood. The grand doors of the chamber begin to open. Imperial reinforcements have finally cracked the lower levels. Time is up. The teleporter activates, bathing the room in blinding green light. The scent of fresh blood and ozone fills the air. 4 fully armored Legion guards step into the room. Luca realizes that if they capture Lillian alive, she will break under torture and expose Ile's treason. There is only one way to make this look convincing. He fires his hand cannon directly at the teleportation mechanism just as Lillian vanishes. The blast shatters the console, making it look like he executed the fleeing hostage and destroyed the escape route. The Imperial guards scan the room. They find Luca standing alone over the ruined machinery. Sergeant Kodrak arrives, demanding a situation report. Luca lies smoothly. He claims he tracked the VIPs to this room and shot them when they tried to activate the device. He frames the entire incident as a successful suppression suppression mission, leaving Ile completely out of the treasonous loop. He explains that he only kept Lillian alive to use her as a guide through the maze. The sergeant nods, accepting the report without question. The cover-up is complete. The Empire believes the Ramones family is dead, but Ile is completely shattered. The cost of his secret has permanently broken his spirit. They return to the capital city of Akbaran, the towering heart of the Empire. For their actions in the arcane fortress, both cadets are awarded medals of honor. The 7th rank Cross Sword Medal, the highest achievement for any trainee. It is an immense honor, but to Ile, it feels like an absolute joke. He stands on the balcony, admitting he never expected Luca to actually pull the trigger on the teleporter. The blonde noble despises himself for sacrificing his own men to save a girl he couldn't even keep safe. Luca tells him to quit whining. In this world, you replace broken parts with metal and keep moving forward, but no amount of titanium can replace a broken conscience. Ile announces he is taking a leave of absence to return home. He needs time away from the military. Before he leaves, he reveals a horrifying truth about Lillian's past. She was raised exactly like her father's deceased wife, forced to adopt her mother's habits, preferences, and even her name. She was a political prop, abused from birth by a twisted patriarch to secure alliances. Ile laughs bitterly. He is a fraud, and he knows it. He explains that his family intentionally leaked rumors about Luca being a secret royal bastard, just to explain how a slum rat got into the academy. Despite everything, Ile admits he still trusts Luca with his life. Back at the training facility, Luca reports to Kinuan. The old instructor is amused by the boy's sudden rise in prestige, but he isn't here to offer praise. Kinuan immediately identifies the flaw in Luca's leadership during the siege. He was too soft. By taking the vanguard himself, Luca risked his own brilliant tactical mind instead of expending his expendable troops. A true commander distances himself emotionally from his assets. The veteran advises him to build superficial relationships so his soldiers will willingly die for him, while he feels nothing in return. Luca absorbs the cold lesson. He vows to be much more proactive in sacrificing others next time. The next day, a completely new set of orders arrives. Commander Hylas is sending Luca to the prestigious Krathia Academy for a 2-month assignment. It is an elite institution for the children of high-ranking nobles, and the military wants their top cadet to mingle with the future bureaucrats. Luca arrives at the academy drop zone, looking entirely out of place with his worn combat gear and cheap duffel bag. His assigned guide is already waiting. She introduces herself immediately. Giselle Custoria. Long black hair, a sharp, unamused expression, and the unmistakable aura of someone who has never been told no. Luca deduces her identity instantly. She is the chief centurion's daughter. Hylas sent his own blood to guide the slum rat, testing the waters for his promised adoption. Giselle is incredibly irritated by Luca's lack of formal attire. She treats him like a stray dog that wandered onto a pristine lawn. Luca could not care less about her noble standards. He just wants to find his room and sleep. They board an academy transport craft and head toward the main campus. Krathia Academy looks less like a school and more like a royal palace complex. The students here wear color-coded uniforms denoting their social rank. It is a microcosm of the Empire's brutal class system. Luca's dark uniform marks him as a commoner, and a passing noble student immediately bumps into him, scoffing at his cheap cybernetics. Giselle scolds him for not bringing colorable clothes, embarrassed to be seen with him. A cheerful voice breaks the tension. Felix Eigen, another Imperial Guard trainee, runs up to greet them. Felix is entirely too happy to see another soldier. He treats Giselle with exaggerated respect, clearly aware of her father's power. Giselle leans in, whispering a blunt warning to Luca. She has absolutely zero intention of marrying him, regardless of what her father plots. Luca is genuinely relieved. The feeling is completely mutual. They arrive at the dormitories. It is a massive, luxurious suite, far beyond anything the orphan has ever lived in. Giselle gives him a brief orientation, handing him a communication device and a schedule. Before she leaves, she drops one specific piece of advice. Stay away from the head of the dormitory. She is the most deranged individual in the entire academy. The door slides open. A girl with an impossibly massive cloud of curly orange hair bounds into the room. This is Barbara. She acts incredibly sweet, introducing herself with a bright smile and a bubbly personality. Luca analyzes her instantly. Worn-out clothes, no noble crest. She is a commoner who somehow became the dorm head. Giselle glares at the curly-haired girl, the disgust rolling off her in waves. Barbara offers to wash Luca's clothes, stepping entirely too close into his personal space. Giselle snaps, ordering her to get lost and stop acting like a servant. Luca watches the dynamic. For someone supposed to be a terrifying psychopath, Barbara just seems aggressively annoying. As they leave, Giselle refuses to elaborate on the warning. The tension between the two girls is palpable. A week passes. The academic classes are mind-numbingly boring for a kid trained to rip heads off. Another student approaches him, Enrico Lacan, a freckled noble with a desperate crush on Giselle. Enrico demands to know what Luca's relationship is with the chief centurion's daughter. Luca sighs, completely exhausted by the teenage drama. He flips the kid over effortlessly to make a point. To get the annoying noble off his back, Luca asks him why Giselle hates Barbara so much. Enrico visibly shudders. He leans in and whispers the truth. Barbara is cursed. Specifically, anyone who gets too close to her ends up involved in bizarre accidents where security androids go completely berserk. They call it the witch's curse. That is why she was made the dorm head, a punishment disguised as a promotion. Right on cue, Barbara waves at them from across the courtyard. She trips, spilling a bucket of dirty mop water directly onto Giselle's pristine shoes. The courtyard goes dead silent. Giselle is absolutely furious. She tells the clumsy girl to cut the act and back off. Luca steps in, diffusing the situation before the noblewoman can escalate it further. Enrico pulls Luca aside, warning him that he just put a target on his own back. The Kano family, a powerful local gang posing as nobles, runs protection for Giselle's clique. They will definitely retaliate against anyone defending Barbara. Luca smirks. A gang of fake nobles looking for a fight is exactly the kind of entertainment he's been hoping for. Dean Guide Alburn, an older veteran with a mechanical arm, briefly checks in on Luca, warning him that the academy is full of monsters wearing sheep's clothing. Late that night, long past curfew, Luca slips out of the dormitory. He isn't looking for a fight with the school bullies. He is looking for the source of the witch's curse. Deep in the woods behind the gym, Enrico steps out of the shadows. The freckled kid has brought the Kano family enforcers to teach the arrogant cadet a lesson. They demand Luca get on his knees and apologize for disrespecting their turf. The lead enforcer powers up a high-grade mechanical arm, ready to smash the cadet's face in. Luca dodges the telegraphed punch without even breaking his posture. He is profoundly disappointed by how slow these kids are. A massive shadow falls over the clearing. A heavy security android steps out of the tree line. Its central optical sensor glows a furious, hostile red. The machine should not be active in this sector. It lets out a mechanical screech and charges directly at the students. The Kano enforcers panic. This isn't a school disciplinary bot. This is a lethal suppression unit operating at maximum output. The android fires a concentrated laser beam, nearly vaporizing one of the bullies. Luca's eyes narrow. The curse is real and it is standing right in front of him. He analyzes the machine's movements. This isn't a random malfunction. The targeting logic is too precise. Someone is manually piloting this thing. Luca drops his stance, his aura flaring as he prepares to dismantle the machine barehanded. He delivers a flawless chop to the android's chassis, testing its durability. The machine responds by deploying a set of lethal foot-long metal claws. The real fight begins now. Deep in the Krathia Academy woods, the witch's curse finally reveals its lethal face. A massive security android, operating completely outside its standard programming, swings a heavy blade. Luca does not even blink. He slips the attack like it never existed. He maneuvers effortlessly around the mechanical giant. The rigid targeting logic gives it away instantly. This is not an automated patrol unit. Someone is manually piloting this machine, and they are hopelessly slow. The Kano family thugs cower in absolute terror, realizing they picked a fight with a monster. Luca shatters the machine's primary weapon system with a single brutal kick. The bullies frantically scream for backup. The cadet steps on the severed android arm, staring straight into its optical sensor. The next morning, the Academy security forces finally step in. Investigator Gillian Campbell recruits Luca as an inside operative. He drops a highly classified piece of intel. The Empire keeps a strict registry of anyone who learns Arki's victima, and Kinuan is the man they are watching most closely. Outside the building, Giselle confronts him. She is furious that he dragged her name into a brawl with the local protection gang. She threatens to make him pay for causing a scene. Luca connects the dots. He knows she ordered Kaliza Kano to torment Barbara, but the heiress's reaction doesn't fit the profile of a mastermind. She isn't acting arrogant. She looks genuinely rattled. His heightened perception registers her elevated pulse and trembling hands. She is terrified of the curse. To test his theory, Luca pays a visit to Kaliza Kano. He skips the pleasantries, laying out her entire operation. She used her ex-boyfriend to hit on Barbara just to fabricate an excuse for bullying. He mentions the family code word, confirming Kaliza answers directly to Giselle. Kaliza loses her mind, violently sweeping the chess pieces off the table. She screams at the cadet, preparing to call her enforcers. Right on cue, Giselle walks in. She shuts the bully down with a single icy glare. The power dynamic is undeniable. The Kano gang are just attack dogs for the heiress. Kalesa backs off immediately, terrified of angering her sponsor. As they walk through the pristine halls, Luca presses the issue. If Giselle has this much influence, why use a gang to bully one commoner? She could have Barbara expelled legally with a single phone call. Giselle snaps, grabbing him by the collar. She begs him to drop the investigation immediately. Her hands are shaking. The most powerful girl in the academy is living in fear. Later that afternoon, Barbara approaches Luca with a massive stack of sandwiches. She plays the innocent victim perfectly, thanking him for saving her. She bows deeply, offering the food as a token of gratitude. Luca accepts the food, his cybernetic eye tracking every micro-expression. The math doesn't check out. No one gets bullied that severely and maintains a perfect, sunny disposition. He decides to provoke her, testing the waters. He asks bluntly if she knows the real reason the heiress hates her. The mask slips. Her eyes glow with unhinged malice in the shadows. The witch is real. She is not a victim. She is a predator playing a game. Luca returns to his room and reports to Jillian's hologram. The investigator confirms that Kalessa's ex-boyfriend just died in a mysterious accident. The body count around Barbara is officially rising, but the logistics don't make sense. A slum girl shouldn't be able to hack military-grade androids. Jillian drops the final clue. Barbara's tuition is sponsored entirely by the Custoria family. The pieces finally click together. He realizes the entire academy hierarchy is a sham. He tracks down the heiress to finish the puzzle. He spots her working on mechanical parts in the academy garage. She actually has technical skills beneath the noble exterior. He meets her in the empty training facility. She spits her water out in surprise when he corners her. She demands to know what he wants now. He tells her he knows her father is funding Barbara's enrollment. He accuses Giselle of orchestrating the entire curse to play the victim. She is outraged, screaming that he is completely insane. He pushes back, refusing to be intimidated. Their argument is abruptly cut short. Barbara appears out of nowhere carrying another care package. She smiles like nothing is wrong, bringing him more food. Luca glares at the curly-haired girl, his patience fully depleted. She turns on the waterworks, claiming she genuinely likes him. He kicks the bench, shattering the wood. He pushes past her, his aura flaring with pure irritation. He has zero interest in playing high school romance games with a psychopath. He tells her the innocent act is creeping him out. Giselle watches the rejection, completely stunned. He leaves her standing alone in the sunset, but Giselle stays behind. The moment the cadet is gone, the atmosphere shifts. Barbara drops the act instantly, wrapping her arms around the terrified noblewoman. A twisted, victorious grin spreads across Barbara's face. She tells the heiress exactly who is in charge. Luca watches from the shadows, mapping the true hierarchy. Giselle isn't the mastermind. She is a hostage to her own charity case. Days pass. Giselle actively avoids him, terrified he knows too much. Luca reports the bizarre hostage situation directly to Commander Hylas. The commander's response is chilling. Keep investigating based on your own judgment. The head of the Imperial Guard is intentionally letting his daughter suffer. The military brass is painting a massive picture, and the students are just ink. If a commoner couldn't hack the droids and nobles only alter them during manufacturing, then the culprit had to have manufacturing access. He pieces together exactly how the curse was born. He finds Felix and borrows his communication device. He makes the call, setting up the final confrontation. He lures Giselle to the outdoor pavilion at sunset. He tells her bluntly that he has absolutely zero romantic interest in her. He isn't looking for a date, he is looking for answers. Having already crushed Enrico's hopes earlier, he is clearing the board of all distractions. He drops the act. He knows she didn't report his investigation to her father, because doing so would expose her own guilt. She stares at him, realizing she has nowhere left to run. The perfect noblewoman facade crumbles into dust. Giselle grabs his uniform, crying and screaming that he ruined everything. Luca isn't moved by the tears. He wants the intel. He offers her a lifeline. He leverages his status as an elite soldier and his impending adoption. He promises that if she tells him the truth, he will protect her. He will be her shield against the witch. The pressure shatters her pride. She nods. She admits it. She created Barbara's curse. Years ago, she genuinely considered the slum girl a trusted friend. But when a boy started hitting on Barbara, Giselle's childish jealousy took over. She planted a voice order in a security robot to chase the boy away. The prank went horribly wrong. The boy tripped and severely injured his head. When the investigation began, Barbara figured out Giselle was the culprit. The innocent girl manipulated the terrified noblewoman into placing a chip on an android to become a fellow victim. The machine went haywire, exactly as Barbara planned. From that day on, Barbara used the secret to blackmail Giselle into absolute submission. The sweet commoner was actually a master manipulator entrapping the academy's most powerful student. Luca listens to the tragic confession, thoroughly unimpressed by the teenage drama. Then his Archie's combat instincts violently spike. A silent laser beam rips through the pavilion. Luca tackles Giselle out of the line of fire. The shot came from nowhere. No sound, no magical aura. An elite stealth attack drone is hovering above them, completely cloaked. He checks his pockets. All he has is a standard combat knife. He curses the situation. Moving at full speed would leave Giselle completely exposed. He demands the heiress stay down and keep her head covered. A barrage of lasers obliterates the stone pillars around them. He yells back that yes, getting shot obviously hurts. He needs to pinpoint the machine's exact coordinates. He asks the terrified heiress for her compact mirror. Using the reflection, he scans the dark sky above the courtyard. He spots the drone locking its targeting laser onto them. He snaps his arm forward, launching the blade with lethal velocity. The knife pierces the power core, detonating the drone in midair. He checks his device. The local network is completely jammed. Giselle's earpiece crackles to life. It isn't a rescue team. It's a recorded message from her family. Her own father set her up. He placed her in the crosshairs specifically to draw out the enemy. She breaks down, realizing she is nothing but disposable bait to her family. The academy goes into full lockdown mode. The grand gates seal shut. Luca gets a transmission through a secure military channel. It confirms the chief centurion personally ordered this assassination attempt. Luca pulls the sobbing girl to her feet. He promises to keep her alive regardless of her father's plans. He checks his his side. The grazing shot is bleeding heavily. He rips a piece of his uniform and ties a brutal tourniquet. Another cloaked drone opens fire from the shadows. The blast shatters the walkway, sending debris flying into the night. Luca realizes this isn't amateur hacking anymore. This is top-tier Imperial hardware. A massive figure steps out of the smoke, heavily armored and radiating pure killing intent. He demands Luca hand over the heiress for ransom. The intruder charges, faster than any machine the cadet has ever faced. He hoists a brutally beaten Felix into the air. He tosses the trainee aside like a broken toy. Luca draws Felix's dropped sidearm, aiming down the sights. He whispers to Giselle to run the exact second he gives the signal. He grabs her face, demanding absolute obedience. He gives the order to run. Giselle sprints down the hallway, leaving the orphan to hold the line alone. Luca opens fire, unloading high-caliber rounds directly at the intruder's visor. The armored man deflects the barrage with his gauntlets effortlessly. The terrorist draws his own weapon, returning fire with lethal precision. The exchange turns the corridor into a storm of lead and shattered stone. Luca drops his stance, realizing standard ballistics won't scratch this guy. He activates his combat eye, forcing his processing speed to the absolute limit. He summons Felix's energy blade using a magnetic grapple. He closes the distance in a fraction of a second, swinging the glowing sword at the terrorist's neck. The man dodges the lethal strike without even looking back. He asks casually if Luca is a practitioner of the Arky's combat method. He shifts his weight, entirely unbothered by the high-speed assault. Luca freezes. That is a highly classified military secret. The intruder tells the kid to back down and not throw his life away for the Empire. Luca ignores the warning, launching a devastating downward cleave. The terrorist blocks it with his bare armored forearm, the kinetic shockwave cracking the floor. He questions why a kid with such insane potential is acting as a lapdog. He asks if Luca really thought he could kill him. The red blade hums with devastating power. The intruder reveals his identity. Rick Kaiser, a Republican terrorist. Rick goes on the offensive, his speed completely outclassing the cadet's enhanced reflexes. Luca realizes his opponent possesses the exact same tactical insight he learned from Kinuan. The terrorist is basically a fully realized veteran version of himself. Rick knocks him down again, overwhelming him with pure kinetic force. The terrorist grabs him by the throat, hoisting him off the ground with terrifying strength. He gives Luca one last chance to beg for his life. Luca spits blood, grinning like a maniac. He refuses to submit. Rick laughs, genuinely respecting the kid's absolute refusal to break. He snaps the boy's neck, sending him into total darkness. A harsh white ceiling light, the sterile smell of an Imperial hospital. Luca tries to sit up and immediately regrets it as his shattered spine screams in agony. He realizes the Imperial guards arrived just in time to reconstruct his nervous system. Chief Centurion Hyla sits by the bed, calmly reading a report. He casually mentions that Felix performed his duties to the end, leaving the trainee severely brain damaged. The commander drops the classified file on the terrorist, Rick Silva Nunes. Luca realizes the Empire kept the rogue guard's existence completely hidden from the public. Hylas reveals the terrifying scope of Operation Juliet. The entire crisis at the Academy was a fabricated sting operation set in motion 5 years ago. The goal was never to arrest Rick. It was to plant a sleeper agent deep within the Nemesis terrorist cell. Barbara is that spy. The Empire intentionally allowed her to act unhinged to build her resume for the terrorist recruiters. Luca is horrified. The destroyed trainees, Giselle's torture, it was all a stage play. They were all disposable pawns directed by the military brass. Hylas states coldly that any threat to the Empire must be eliminated, regardless of the civilian cost. He feels sick, realizing his entire sense of justice was just another tool for them to use. The commander slides a stack of non-disclosure agreements across the bed. To survive, Luca must sign his silence and officially bury the truth. He rips the IV lines from his arm, his blood boiling with pure disgust. He refuses to stay in the room with the man who orchestrated this nightmare. Hylas wishes him luck, knowing the orphan has no choice but to accept reality eventually. Walking back through the Academy halls, the atmosphere is chillingly normal. He checks the database. Barbara's file is completely wiped. She never existed. The Empire designed a twisted, psychopathic teenager just to infiltrate a rebel cell. Luca questions his own entire existence. If they manufactured Barbara, did they manufacture his encounter with Kanuan too? Is his entire life just another Imperial script? The paranoia has already taken root in his mind. He clenches his mechanical fist. He refuses to be a puppet. He travels straight to the lower sector and kicks open the door to Kanuan's office. The old instructor is calmly brewing tea, acting like nothing happened. Luca relays Rick Kaiser's regards, dropping the bomb right on the desk. Kinuan admits he and Rick were in the same crop of trainees decades ago. Luca accuses his master of being a sleeper agent for the Republicans. Kinuan's expression darkens. He warns his student that asking the wrong questions leads to immediate execution. The easygoing mentor vanishes, replaced by a cold-blooded veteran. Kinuan decides the kid has bled enough to earn the truth. He explains why Rick didn't crush his head, because they both practice the same forbidden art. 200 years ago, the first major rebellion against the Empire was led by Noel Malizka. He created the Arky's Victima combat method specifically for guerrilla warfare. A fighting fighting style that didn't require expensive, traceable imperial cybernetics. The rebels used it to strike critical facilities and vanish into the populace. The rebel leaders disguised themselves as ordinary civilians, bypassing routine inspections. Luca realizes that is why Rick gave him a chance to live. He saw a fellow rebel in the making. Kinuan's face goes completely dead. The answer is simple and horrific. They responded with absolute, unrestrained genocide. They burned entire sectors to ash, killing thousands of civilians. That is why the Empire keeps a strict registry of anyone who practices the method today. And Kinuan is the man tasked with monitoring the only combat style that can threaten the regime. Luca pieces it together. Hylas sent him to Kinuan because he suspects the instructor is secretly organizing a new rebellion. Kinuan laughs. He challenges his student to find the proof. If Luca proves his master is a traitor, he will rise to the top of the Imperial Guard instantly. Kinuan gives him a massive hint. Follow his tracks through the lower sector slums. Luca wonders how the man can be so calm with a target on his back. He realizes Hylas might have known about this conversation before it even happened. He promises to report everything to the chief centurion. Walking back to the upper levels, the sheer scale of the conspiracy crushes down on him. He is trapped in a lethal game of chess between his master and the commander. He checks the Imperial archives for Noel Maliska. The data is completely expunged. The Empire erased the man from history. To survive this, he has to play the perfect loyal soldier. He takes the elevator back up to the sterile, sunlit world of the military elite. He wonders if his master is trying to lead him to Nemesis to have him eliminated. He refuses to be manipulated anymore. He will finish the investigation on his own terms. Luca returns to Hylas's office to deliver his report. He tells the commander that Kinuan is intentionally taunting them. Hylas admits he allows the dangerous instructor to live because his training results are simply too good to lose. And Luca is the finest weapon Kinuan has forged in decades, making him the perfect spy. Luca requests a blank check, unrestricted travel passes, investigation funds, and top-level database access. Hylas smirks, noting the boy's blatant ambition. But a slum rat needs fangs to survive in the capital. Luca admits he would rather not die over some underwater conspiracy. The commander tosses a high-level authorization pass onto the desk. Full planetary clearance. He is officially accepting the slum rat into the Custoria family. Luca bows his head, selling his soul to the devil to secure the power he needs. The commander views the entire adoption as a fun social experiment to stimulate his actual children. Luca leaves the military headquarters, stepping onto a private transport ship. He despises the decadent upper levels, but this is the battlefield he chose. The Custoria estate is a massive, fortified palace floating above the city. The interior is drowning in extravagant wealth and classical architecture. Hylas tells him to go rest in his assigned room while they prepare for introductions. The sheer opulence of the place and the army of servants makes Luca's skin crawl. The door slides open. Giselle walks in, dressed in formal evening wear. She immediately bows her head, apologizing sincerely for how she treated him at the academy. The trauma of the assassination attempt completely broke her arrogant facade. She smiles, noting that he is acting surprisingly warm. She reminds him of the promise he made back at the academy. Luca grins. He tells her that is exactly how a noble of the Empire should speak. He offers to share some vital intelligence as repayment for her honesty. She brings up a holographic display showing the family hierarchy. She warns him that her two older brothers are incredibly dangerous, Nikolaos the eldest and Joel the second son. As a decorated elite soldier, Luca poses a direct threat to their succession claims. Luca smiles. He doesn't care about their political games. He just wants the resources. He offers her a genuine alliance. If she backs his play, he will protect her position. Giselle laughs, the first genuine smile she has shown since they met. She shakes his hand, officially accepting the slum rat as her brother. He agrees. The title sounds corny anyway. The dining hall is a masterclass in psychological intimidation. Luca analyzes the players, Joel, Nikolaos, and Eva, the matriarch. Eva welcomes him with a smile so fake it could cut glass. Giselle whispers for him to keep his guard up. Commander Hylas takes his seat at the head of the table, and the feast begins. Luca runs the tactical data. Nikolaos has the family on his side. Joel has the conservatives. Luca decides to play the exact role they expect from a slum kid, the uncultured brute. He stabs a massive piece of steak and cuts it aggressively. The entire table stops eating, horrified by the display. Luca chews loudly, grease dripping down his chin. Joel takes the bait immediately, mocking his terrible table manners. Luca plays the fool, noting internally that Joel is an insecure idiot who is easy to manipulate, but Nikolaos watches him with cold, calculating eyes. The eldest son smiles, a terrifyingly composed expression. He steps in, defending Luca smoothly, claiming a true soldier doesn't need fancy etiquette. Joel loses his temper completely, drawing a steak knife right at the dinner table. Nikolaos scolds him, playing the perfect, reasonable air. But Luca's enhanced insight reads the micro-tension in the eldest brother's jaw. Nikolaos isn't defending him, he's testing him. Luca finishes his meal, projecting the aura of a harmless idiot. Nikolaos compliments his military medals, sounding perfectly polite. He slams his fork down, his polite tone hiding a thinly veiled threat. Luca stares down at his plate, realizing the eldest brother saw through his act completely. This house is a snake pit. The Custoria family dinner is exactly the kind of battlefield Commander Hylas thrives on. Nikolaos's eyes narrow as the conversation with his younger brother grows increasingly heated. Hylas sits back, sipping his wine, completely unbothered by the open hostility among his actual children. As the patriarch, the chief centurion is actively stoking this conflict, just to test his new weapon. Ava intervenes before knives are drawn, forcefully redirecting the room's attention to the newly adopted slum rat. Giselle whispers her approval as they walk away. Luca played the uncultured brute perfectly. Later that night, the illusion of safety vanishes the moment Luca senses a presence in his private quarters. The commander steps out of the shadows, entirely bypassing the estate's top-tier security grid. He claims he just wanted a quiet visit, free from the prying eyes of the political factions. Hylas pours 2 glasses of high-end liquor, an uncharacteristic gesture from a man who lives for absolute control. Luca catches the glass but refuses to drink. He cites the strict biological limitations of the Archie's combat method. Alcohol actively degrades his neurological response time. Hylas stares at him, amused but utterly chilled by the boy's mechanical discipline. The commander delivers a piece of unsolicited advice. To survive the Imperial Guard, a soldier needs to harbor some illogical impurity, a hobby, a flaw, something entirely unrelated to killing. Otherwise, the pressure of absolute perfection will eventually shatter the human mind. Hylas leaves, leaving Luca alone with a terrifying realization. The patriarch is actively warning him not to become exactly what the military trained him to be. The next morning, Giselle guides him into the family's most heavily guarded sector. The Custoria Armory is the size of an industrial dreadnought, housing enough firepower to conquer a small planet. She explains the strict family tradition. Only the women are permitted to manage the heavy armaments. It is an ancient failsafe to ensure that political marriages and internal rivalries don't result in tampered cybernetics. At the heart of the vault stands an absolute masterpiece of mechanical engineering. Scylla, the personal full-body armor of the family's founder. Luca stares up at the relic, his cybernetic eye recording every millimeter of its construction for future use. Leaving the armory, Luca and Hylas venture deep into the secluded woods on the estate grounds. They are visiting the Silver Moon Chambers, the retirement home for the family's ancient elders. Hylas mentions casually that of the 7 living elders, the vast majority opposed adopting a commoner, but opposition from an elder is just a formality. The patriarch's word is absolute law. Luca follows the commander up the towering stone steps, bracing himself for the political theater. The heavy doors swing open, revealing a chamber draped in thick incense and shadows. The elders sit like mummified statues, barely registering the presence of the most powerful man in the military. One of them acknowledges the boy, admitting he possesses the eyes of someone perfectly willing to step over corpses to survive. A robed figure beckons Luca closer. The ancient man grabs the boy's face, his grip surprisingly strong. He delivers a chilling prophecy. If Luca wishes to live long, he must learn to swallow chaos itself. The orphan's mind races. Is the elder referring to the looming terrorist threat or something far worse? The audience concludes. The elders return to their silent meditation. As they leave, Luca questions why the commander allowed him to hear that. Hylas knows about Luca's connection to Kinuan. He knows the boy is fundamentally untrustworthy. The patriarch just smiles, refusing to hand out easy answers. He expects his new son to decode the Empire's secrets entirely on his own. On his final day at the residence, Luca's departure is violently interrupted. A young boy aims a heavy-caliber revolver directly at the cadet's chest. This is Emilio, Nikolaos's son, a spoiled aristocrat who has never experienced consequence in his life. The brat sneers, fully aware that a commoner isn't allowed to strike a pure-blood noble. The hammer falls, but the chamber is empty. Luca doesn't even flinch. He steps forward, his aura flaring with cold, lethal intent. Emilio screams, suddenly realizing the gun didn't magically protect him from the monster standing in front of him. Before Luca can snap the kid's wrist, Joel intervenes, sweeping the boy out of the way. The second brother throws Emilio to the floor, berating him for playing with live weapons. Luca retrieves the dropped revolver, popping the cylinder. He stares dead at Joel. The kid was a pawn. Joel orchestrated this entire encounter just to corner him. The second son drops the caring uncle act immediately. He demands a private audience, clearly terrified of what Luca might report to the chief centurion. Behind closed doors, Emilio sobs quietly in the arms of the maids. Luca cuts straight to the point. Joel risked his own nephew's life just to fabricate an excuse to talk. Joel grins, shamelessly admitting his own ruthless pragmatism. He recognizes that Luca is highly intelligent, far more dangerous than he appeared at dinner. He knows Luca formed a secret alliance with Giselle. The political lines are already drawn. Joel lays out the brutal reality of the Custoria succession war. If Nikolaos wins, Joel will be executed to tie up loose ends. It is a mathematical certainty. Neither Joel nor Luca possesses the overwhelming personal strength to rewrite those rules. Joel wants Luca to act as a public enemy, drawing the ire of the family's military faction. By pretending to fight Joel, Luca would inadvertently funnel all the moderate political support directly into Joel's lap. Luca listens to the desperate pitch, thoroughly unimpressed by the coward's strategy. Joel assumes that without a pure-blood lineage, Luca needs a puppet master to survive. Luca agrees to the terms verbally, entirely planning to betray the idiot the moment he secures a enough influence. The political scheming is violently interrupted by a massive explosion on the transport ship. The orbital craft shudders violently, the artificial gravity failing as the hull breaches. Luca stabilizes himself against the bulkheads, immediately assessing the structural damage. He checks the command console. The navigation system hasn't malfunctioned. It was manually overridden. An emergency hologram of a heavily distorted, smiley face flickers across the monitors. Nemesis, the Republican terrorist cell. The transport plunges toward the barren surface of the planet, burning through the atmosphere. Hyla stands casually by the window, entirely unbothered by the fact they are seconds away from a catastrophic impact. He informs Luca not to panic. The crash is right on schedule. Luca connects the dots. The Chief Centurion orchestrated his own assassination attempt. The shock absorption gel floods the cabin right as the ship slams into the wasteland. The gel recedes, leaving Luca gasping for air amidst the shattered metal. Hylas reveals the grim truth. They are acting as live bait to legitimize Barbara's infiltration into the Nemesis ranks. The terrorists don't hesitate, unleashing a barrage of heavy artillery on the downed craft. The wreckage offers absolutely zero cover against the incoming plasma fire. Luca spots the advancing heavily armored units and realizes they are completely outgunned. The Nemesis transport ships hover in the atmosphere, dropping hundreds of foot soldiers into the dust. Hylas steps out of the smoke, raising a massive, multi-barreled weapon system. It is not a standard issue rifle. It is an orbital targeting designator. A blinding pillar of blue light erupts from the heavens, guided directly by the Patriarch's weapon. The satellite laser completely vaporizes a massive section of the advancing terrorist army. Hylas grins like a maniac, reveling in the sheer devastation he just commanded. The beam carves a trench of molten glass through the wasteland, leaving nothing but ash. Luca is genuinely horrified. This isn't military tactics. This is a god complex with an activation trigger. The surviving terrorists panic, entirely unprepared to face an orbital strike during a standard ambush. A Nemesis heavy gunner locks onto them, screaming to ignore the kid and focus fire on the commander. But Hylas's satellite weapon needs time to recharge. The foot soldiers close the distance rapidly. The Patriarch calmly explains that holding the absolute highest rank means you have the power to reshape the map itself. The Nemesis Vanguard charges through the smoke, heavily modified with illegal cybernetics. A sniper takes aim from the ridge, preparing to blow the commander's head off. Hylas doesn't even look. He fires a concentrated blast, obliterating the ridge and the sniper instantly. He orders Luca to handle the heavily armored brawlers while he manages the artillery fire. Luca draws his blade, annoyed by the vague command, but he has no choice. He fires a grappling hook into a terrorist's chest, pulling himself directly into the chaotic melee. The dark-haired cadet moves like a phantom, severing limbs before the terrorists can even track his silhouette. The Nemesis fighters flood the zone, relying purely on numbers to overwhelm the two Imperial targets. Luca pushes the Archie's combat method to its limit, his perception mapping every incoming strike perfectly. He drops low, sweeping the legs of a heavily armed combatant and burying a blade in his neck. A dual-wielding terrorist swings a pair of high-frequency thermal swords directly at Luca's head. Luca deflects the lethal strike with absolute precision. The terrorist recognizes the movement pattern instantly. He accuses Luca of using their own Republican martial art. The enemy fighter attempts a counter, his speed artificially enhanced by spinal implants. Luca abandons his blade and catches the terrorist's cybernetic arm mid-swing. He violently applies rotational torque, tearing the mechanical limb entirely out of its socket. Hylas watches the brutal execution, clearly satisfied with his new son's complete lack of hesitation. The commander admits he planned this ambush specifically to avoid wasting the intelligence gathered by Operation Juliet. Luca stares at the carnage. If the Chief Centurion considers himself expendable bait, then a commoner trainee is worth less than dirt. He realizes there is no safe harbor in the Empire. He is just another gear in a massive, blood-soaked machine. To survive, he must prove that he is a weapon they simply cannot afford to break. Luca steps over the corpses and volunteers for the most suicidal assignment available, the native animal cleansing mission on planet Novus. A year passes in a blur of relentless, agonizing violence. Luca returns from the front lines, his body fundamentally transformed by extreme combat and survival. The military mechanics strip out his old, damaged cybernetics, replacing them with state-of-the-art military hardware. He steps out of the medical bay. The skinny slum rat is gone. He is built like a premier Imperial killer. In the break room, the atmosphere instantly shifts. Ile Karthika sits at the table, his eyes darker, his posture radiating a terrifying new authority. The rumors are already circulating. Ile violently crippled his own older brother to seize the position of family heir. The idealistic noble who couldn't bear the death of his friends has shattered completely, replaced by a ruthless pragmatist. Ile looks at his own hands, admitting he finally understands what it takes to enact real change in the Empire. He approaches Luca not as a friendly rival, but as a political ally. The two of them stand on the landing pad, overlooking the vast mechanical sprawl of Akbaran. Ile reveals that he seduced his brother's fiancée purely to provoke the duel that allowed him to cripple the heir legally. Luca smirks, genuinely respecting the sheer unhinged malice of the strategy. The blonde noble asks for a permanent alliance, If they combine their newfound ruthlessness, they can climb to the top of the military brass together. Luca accepts the handshake. He needs powerful friends, and Aile finally has the fangs required to be useful. They forge a pact built on shared trauma and a mutual hatred for the system that created them. Aile welcomes him back to the capital. The real war is about to begin. Luca descends into the lower sector, the smog-choked underbelly of the city where the law is purely theoretical. He tracks down a specific underground clinic, ignoring the heavy security details guarding the door. The clinic belongs to Gabriel, the former orphanage director who embezzled funds and fled into the criminal underworld. Luca steps into the dimly lit room. He grabs the massively augmented cyborg by the throat, driving him brutally into the steel table. Gabriel wails in terror, his brand new cybernetic chassis entirely useless against the cadet's raw strength. The corrupt director is recovering from a recent gunshot wound, making the interrogation remarkably easy. Luca demands a custom set of weapons, forged specifically to handle the high-tier threats he's about to face. Gabriel enthusiastically presents his masterwork, Cruxus, a blade meant to bring calamity, and Ruina, a heavy-caliber handgun. Luca inspects the heavy pistol, testing the grip and weight distribution. It is a flawless piece of illegal engineering. He leaves the terrified mechanic shivering on the floor, fully intending to exploit his criminal connections later. Gabriel begs not to be dragged into whatever suicidal mission the Imperial Guard trainee is planning. Luca doesn't ask. He orders the cyborg to heal up and stand by for a hostile takeover. Walking through the neon-drenched slums, the holographic whales swim through the acid rain above. Luca checks the underground registry. Kinuan was highly active down here decades ago, maintaining ties with the local fight pits. The poverty is suffocating. Orphans huddle in the alleyways, staring at the bright advertisements for military cybernetics. Luca stops outside his old orphanage. The new director is just as corrupt as Gabriel was, hoarding resources while the kids starve. He watches from the shadows, his expression completely blank. He knows handing them cash will only make them a target for the local gangs. Gabriel finally catches up, flanked by a squad of low-tier enforcers. He tries to act tough, attempting to reassert his dominance on his own turf. Luca shatters his nose with a single brutal strike, dropping the massive cyborg instantly. He stands over the bleeding mechanic, reminding him that a metal body doesn't upgrade a coward's courage. Gabriel immediately switches back to begging, promising absolute loyalty if the cadet just spares his life. Luca accepts the submission. He needs a proxy to build his own gang, and Gabriel is desperate enough to follow orders. Their first target is the Colosseum, the largest illegal fighting arena in the lower sector. They confront Aleph, the current manager of the arena, a man who rose to power by executing the previous boss. Luca cuts through the pleasantries, demanding all available intel on Tora, the former manager and Kinuan's only known associate. Aleph refuses to cooperate unless Gabriel agrees to join his expanding syndicate as a subordinate. When Gabriel hesitates, Aleph's heavily armed bodyguards draw their weapons. Luca draws Ruina in a fraction of a second. He fires a single shot, the kinetic force blowing the weapon completely out of the guard's hands. He moves faster than their optics can process, dismantling the security detail before Aleph even blinks. Aleph's smug confidence evaporates entirely. He realizes he just threatened a top-tier Imperial weapon. Luca stands on the manager's chest, heavily suggesting that providing the intel is now a matter of survival, not negotiation. Back at Gabriel's clinic, a red-haired mechanic named Gilda is actively repairing the damage Luca caused. She explains that high-end cybernetics require constant, expensive maintenance to prevent rust from the acidic rain. Luca sits quietly, drinking coffee and reading the digital file Aleph handed over. The report confirms that Tora's entire inner circle was systematically purged when Aleph took over. Gilda flirts shamelessly, entirely unbothered by the terrifying cadet sitting in her shop. Luca ignores her completely, focusing on the one surviving member of Tora's crew, Ken Noma, currently locked away in a high-security psychiatric ward. As Luca and Gabriel drive toward the hospital, the transport is violently ambushed. A squad of heavily armed gangers opens fire on their vehicle from the overpass. Gabriel panics, screaming that a rival boss named Martina ordered the hit because he rejected her recruitment offer. Luca kicks the door open, entirely exhausted by the endless turf wars of the lower sector. The gangers unleash concentrated laser fire, pinning the two men behind the ruined transport. A heavy anti-armor round ricochets off the pavement, nearly taking Gabriel's head off. Luca returns fire with Ruina, the heavy-caliber shot detonating a fuel cell near the attackers. The gangers retreat, realizing they engaged a target significantly above their pay grade. Gabriel cowers behind the debris, proving exactly how useless he is in a real firefight. They finally arrive at the psychiatric hospital, bypassing the bribed security guards. Inside the sterile containment cell sits Ken Noma, his long hair completely masking his hollow eyes. Luca introduces himself, asking directly about Tora and Kanuan. Ken remains completely catatonic, staring at the floor as if his mind has been entirely wiped. Without warning, Ken snaps into motion, producing a concealed blade from his sleeve. Luca intercepts the lethal strike, his mechanical reflexes barely matching the patient's sudden burst of speed. The madman's technique is unmistakable. He is using a highly advanced form of the Archi's combat method. Luca disarms him effortlessly, twisting the blade away and pinning the man to the floor. He analyzes the situation. Ken's brain is fried, but his muscle memory is deeply ingrained with Kinuan's teachings. Luca realizes Kinuan used Torah not just for information, but to build an entire underground army. The old master retraced his steps, organizing the lower sector while maintaining plausible deniability. Hylas's warnings about the impurity suddenly make sense. Kinuan survived the madness by perfectly compartmentalizing his emotional attachments. He kept his allies at arm's length, ensuring that when the Empire eventually purged them, his mind wouldn't shatter. In the Mindscape, Luca pieces together the true philosophy behind the forbidden martial art. Back at the Imperial Training Center, Luca spars intensely with Kinuan, attempting to replicate the new theories. Kinuan deflects a full-power thrust with absolute ease, using a single mechanical arm to ground the kinetic force. The old instructor demonstrates the next level of Archi's Victima, utilizing the brain's untapped processing power to predict enemy movements before they manifest. He praises Luca's rapid growth but warns him that physical limitations will always bottleneck pure technique. He dismisses the boy for the day, claiming they will continue the lesson later. The moment Luca steps away, Kinuan collapses against the wall, coughing up a terrifying amount of blood. The prolonged use of the Archi's method has finally caught up to him. His internal organs are failing. Luca pretends not to notice, strictly applying the rule of emotional distance he just learned. In the lower sector, Gabriel finally receives the funding required to turn their ragtag crew into a genuine syndicate. The real work begins now. Gabriel's massive cybernetic frame blocks the doorway of the psychiatric ward. He's dressed to play the part of a high-end sponsor. Luca steps out from behind him, looking entirely out of place in a hospital for the broken. The plan is straightforward. They've bought off the staff, the security grid is blind, and nobody is going to notice one missing patient. Luca draws a specialized military-grade syringe, preparing to pull a man out of a catatonic nightmare. He drives the needle directly into the IV line, flooding the patient's system with a highly concentrated chemical cocktail. Ken Noma's eyes snap open. The vacant stare vanishes instantly, replaced by the terrifying clarity of a veteran killer. He doesn't even hesitate. A concealed shiv flashes in his hand as he lunges toward the closest threat. Gabriel blocks the desperate strike with his armored forearm, the metal sparking under the impact. Ken moves with terrifying fluidity, his shattered mind instinctively remembering the lethal arcs of his old combat training. Luca steps in, catching the madman's wrist and effortlessly neutralizing the kinetic force of the swing. Ken collapses back onto the bed, gasping for air as the stimulants forcibly rewire his ruined nervous system. Luca doesn't give him a second to breathe. He demands to know the real identity of the man who sponsored Torah's syndicate. Ken stares back, his sanity hanging by a thread. He confirms the alias they used, a man named Noel. Luca's expression darkens. Noel was the founder of the Archi's combat method, which means Kinuan was the true mastermind pulling the strings in the lower sector. The cadet immediately shifts targets. He needs to find the money trail that Aleph inherited when he took over the Colosseum. If Aleph is sitting on Kinuan's old financial network, they need to seize that ledger by any means necessary. Gabriel's mechanical hand clenches nervously. He knows exactly how dangerous Aleph is. The cyborg warns Luca that taking the ledger will require declaring open war on the Colosseum's remaining forces. Luca ignores the warning. He has to find the ghost companies Kinuan used to funnel his wealth. Outside the hospital, the negotiations for backup are already going terribly wrong. A thug screams for mercy. A sleek black heel pins the screaming man violently to the concrete. Enter Grace, a former Imperial Guard trainee who washed out and became a lethal enforcer for the La Vie en Rose syndicate. She smacks her fan directly against Luca's chest, completely unfazed by his military status. She hates people who are late. Gabriel's enforcers lie groveling in the dirt. It took Grace less than a minute to dismantle the entire squad. Above them, the neon whales drift through the smog-choked skies of the lower sector. Gabriel sweats profusely as they walk. La Vie en Rose isn't just a gang. It's a heavily armed fortress of women protecting their own. Grace explains that their boss, the Diva, took a specific interest in the cyborg's recent rise to power. A holographic memory of Aleph's creepy, arrogant smirk flashes through Luca's mind. They arrive at the Clear Sea Pavilion. The sheer architectural scale of the place makes the rest of the slums look like a junkyard. Gabriel is practically vibrating with anxiety, terrified of angering the women inside. The moment the heavy doors slide open, a thick, suffocating red mist floods the grand entryway. Luca doesn't blink. He draws his heavy-caliber handgun, Ruina, in a fraction of a second. He aims straight up and fires a concussive round directly into the ceiling. The kinetic shockwave shatters the mist instantly, revealing a dozen heavily armed women aiming rifles at their heads. The sharp click of elegant red heels echoes from the balcony above. Martina, the diva of La Vie en Rose. She looks down at the intruders with absolute, unquestioned authority. Luca keeps his gun raised, his eyes scanning the room for secondary threats. Grace bows respectfully to her boss, apologizing for the dramatic entrance. Gabriel realizes they are surrounded by elite killers and wishes he was anywhere else. Luca lowers the weapon. He refuses to play along with the theatrical intimidation tactics. Martina descends the grand staircase, her gaze completely bypassing bypassing the armed guards. Luca smirks, returning her cold stare with zero hesitation. She hides her face behind a floral fan, intrigued by a young man who doesn't instantly bow to her pressure. The diva leans in dangerously close, analyzing the confident military posture that doesn't fit a slum rat. She cuts the pleasantries and drops her single, non-negotiable condition for an alliance. She points her fan directly at Gabriel. If they want her help to crush Aleph, the cyborg must become her personal lover. Gabriel's jaw practically unhinges. He looks at Luca in sheer panic. The cyborg whispers frantically that he would genuinely rather die in a shootout than agree to this arrangement. Gabriel trembles uncontrollably as the beautiful, terrifying gang leader stares him down. Martina smiles. It isn't a joke. She has a reputation for breaking men until they are completely obedient. She leans over the terrified cyborg, promising to elevate his status if he just submits. Luca steps forward, stepping between the predator and her prey. He wants to talk business, not romance. Martina's eyes widen in unhinged delight. The rejection only makes the situation more entertaining for her. Gabriel looks like he's going to faint right on the extravagant carpet. The diva suddenly drops the act entirely. Her posture straightens and the ruthless syndicate boss takes over. Grace watches closely as Luca formally proposes their joint strike against the Colosseum. Gabriel pulls out a holographic drive containing Tora's old accounting records. Luca admits bluntly that he doesn't trust Aleph, and he certainly doesn't trust La Vie en Rose either. They exit the pavilion into the neon-lit rain. The temporary alliance is officially struck, but the tension is heavy. Grace stops him in the alley. She knows a washed-out trainee shouldn't have the combat processing speed Luca just displayed. She bows slightly, maintaining a respectful but suspicious distance as they part ways. Back at the hideout, Luca boots up the stolen ledger. The numbers confirm exactly what Ken said. Millions funneled to Kinuan. But Kinuan wasn't sloppy. The funds were meticulously routed through dozens of long-dead ghost companies. Tracing dead accounts requires top-tier military clearance. Luca accesses a highly classified Imperial channel. Nikolaos, the eldest Custoria brother, answers the call with a perfectly manicured smile. The aristocrat happily agrees to run the companies through the central database. Luca stares at the dying hologram, entirely aware that Nikolaos is just using this favor to bind him politically. The lower sector is a powder keg. Aleph, Ken Noma, Martina, and Gabriel are all circling each other in the dark. Exhausted, Luca collapses onto his bed. A notification pings from the Academy network before his eyes can even close. He checks the official trainee deployment logs. A female cadet excitedly waves to him in the Digital Academy forum. The trainees are buzzing about one name dominating the leaderboards, Ile Karthika. Ile has been violently taking on every high-risk mission available, completely abandoning his old pacifist ideals. Luca's mechanical eye glows in the dark. The blonde noble isn't just training, he's preparing for a massacre. The phantom imagery of Hylas and Kinuan looms in his mind. To survive these monsters, Luca has to become one. The female cadet tells him to chill out and not push himself into an early grave. Luca just nods, patting her shoulder. She doesn't understand the invisible war happening right above her head. He travels to the high-security personal repair sector to find his rival. The heavy doors slide open, revealing an entirely upgraded suite. Ile sits comfortably in a mechanical diagnostic chair, flashing a sharp, dangerous grin. The blonde noble stands up. The skinny, idealistic boy is gone, replaced by a heavily muscled, weaponized physique. Ile turns, inviting his political ally deeper into the restricted vault to show off his spoils. Floating, suspended in a massive containment tank, is a horrifying, fully mechanical beast from planet Novus. Ile explains the terrifying reality of these creatures. They aren't built in a factory. They biologically reproduce using metal. Luca presses his hand against the cold glass, genuinely unnerved by the implications of a living machine. The beast is scheduled for immediate transport to the Emperor's classified research division. Ile steps away from the tank and pulls out a sleek, locked case containing his second prize, a beautifully carved dagger, forged entirely from the bone of an extinct native predator. Luca swings it in a tight arc. The blade hums silently, cutting the air with zero kinetic resistance. He tests it against a dense energy field, and the bone slices straight through the projection seamlessly. Ile formally gifts the weapon to Luca to celebrate his rise within the Custoria hierarchy. Luca sheathes the blade, feeling the terrifyingly perfect weight of the hyper-compressed bone. He wipes the sweat from his neck, realizing this isn't just a gift, it's an investment in their bloody future. The holographic projection of a dying galaxy fills the room, a reminder of the Empire's nihilistic philosophy. The Custoria family crest shines on the wall. To claim it, they have to survive the current heirs. Luca looks at the dagger. It is the first genuine, useful gift he has ever received in this miserable life. A data packet arrives on his comms. Nikolaos actually delivered the ghost company intel. The eldest brother smiles holographically, reminding Luca that debts in this family are always collected eventually. The screen violently stutters, overriding the feed with a blaring red emergency notification. A funeral procession. Rain pours down relentlessly over the elite military cemetery. Luca stands frozen in the downpour, his mind racing to process the catastrophic shift in the board. Nikolaos Custoria is dead. The eldest heir was crushed inside his transport ship. The official report claims it was a tragic accident. Joel stands beneath his black umbrella, his face perfectly composed but radiating poorly hidden satisfaction. The torrential rain washes over the marble tombstones as the military brass offers their hollow condolences. Commander Hylas watches the casket lower, his expression unreadable behind his thick beard. Luca clenches his jaw. The timing is mathematically impossible. Nikolaos died exactly while digging into Kinuan's past. Giselle materializes beside him, the shadow of her black umbrella offering no warmth. She whispers without looking at him. Her older brother was just murdered, and she knows Joel is likely the one who ordered the strike. Luca stares straight ahead, completely masking his terror behind the discipline of a soldier. Joel strolls directly into their private space, completely ignoring funeral etiquette. He smirks at Giselle, mockingly asking what the two runts of the family are whispering about. Giselle glares at the new primary heir, utterly disgusted by his lack of basic humanity. Luca steps up, aggressively crowding Joel's space. He reminds the second son that he is a trained killer, not a politician. Joel's smug confidence cracks as he realizes the commoner isn't afraid to cause a scene at a funeral. An elite military aide interrupts the confrontation. Commander Hylas is demanding Luca's presence immediately. Luca enters the towering, dimly lit office. The silence is far heavier than the rain outside. The commander turns around. The patriarch's towering frame casts a massive shadow over the room. Why did my son die? Hylas glares down at the cadet, the overwhelming pressure of his aura pressing into Luca's chest. Luca looks up. If he lies, he knows he will never leave this room alive. He admits the truth. He asked Nikolaos to trace Kinuan's financial network, making the heir a target for assassination. The ghostly faces of the dead son and the ruthless father overlap in Luca's mind. Hylas doesn't scream. He doesn't strike him. He just nods slowly, his face devoid of grief. Luca's eyes widen. Hylas isn't mourning. He is calculating the tactical value of the assassination. The commander tightens his mechanical gauntlet. A traitor capable of killing an imperial official is exactly the prey he is hunting. He orders Luca to follow the bloody trail. The heir's death simply confirms that their target is deeply embedded in the upper echelons. Luca leaves the room drenched in cold sweat, fully realizing his adoptive father is a sociopath who viewed his own son as bait. Hours later, Luca returns to the lower sector hideout, ready to confront Aleph with the new intel. The door opens to a pathetic sight. Gabriel is openly sobbing on the floor. The massive cyborg is on his knees, begging for forgiveness before Luca even asks a question. Gabriel scrambles backward, terrified of the lethal cadet's reaction. The stuttering cyborg finally delivers the disastrous news. Ken Noma was sedated in the back room until last night. Luca stops dead. The madman is gone. Gabriel desperately tries to shift the blame, claiming Ken was so heavily drugged he couldn't have planned an escape. Luca looks past the blubbering idiot toward the shattered observation window. He analyzes the broken glass. The fracture patterns are wrong for an exit point. Gabriel loses his mind, screaming that Martina is going to tear him apart for losing their best asset. Luca shoves the cyborg against the floor, telling him to shut up before he breaks his mechanical jaw. He taps his earpiece, calling Aleph immediately to demand access to the external security feeds. The line rings, but Aleph doesn't answer. The situation is escalating completely out of control. Grace's voice crackles over the comms. She warns Luca that whoever broke out is highly trained and incredibly lethal. Gabriel wails on the floor, absolutely useless in a crisis. The cyborg looks up with wide, terrified eyes as Grace delivers the final update over the radio. They found a body in the alleyway. It is one of Aleph's top enforcers. The man lies dead in a pool of his own blood, his throat perfectly slit. Grace stares down at the corpse, noting that this level of precision requires a master blade user. A hovering security drone projects a hard-light hologram of the alley's recent activity. The playback shows Ken Noma's glowing digital silhouette moving flawlessly through the shadows. The madman didn't stumble out in a drugged haze. He vaulted straight up the maintenance ladder like an acrobat. A close-up of the holographic playback reveals the exact angle of the blade strike. Pure Archies methodology. Luca touches the wall. The blood is still fresh. The execution happened less than 20 minutes ago. The cadet curses his own arrogance. He severely underestimated the recovery speed of a Kinuan disciple. Gabriel trembles violently, realizing the ghost of the Colosseum is back to claim his territory. Luca and Gabriel sprint toward the main avenue, leaving Grace to secure the perimeter. Another corpse lies near the street corner. The trail of bodies is leading straight toward Aleph's base of operations. Aleph's panicked face suddenly flickers onto a public hologram terminal, screaming for immediate backup. Luca doesn't bother replying. He turns his back to the screen, tracking the blood splatters. A black market hover taxi slams into the flooded street, its massive engines roaring. They arrive at the Colosseum's medical wing in record time, the taxi skidding sideways into the loading bay. Grace is already waiting for them, completely unfazed by the escalating violence. The hallway is a massacre. Dozens of highly augmented guards lie dead or dismembered across the sterile white floor. Grace observes the carnage. A single man with a blade dismantled a heavily armed security detail in minutes. Luca steps carefully over the corpses, keeping his eyes locked on the heavy blast doors at the end of the hall. He draws the Graken boot. Standard firearms are too slow against a target who can read muscle twitches. Several discarded guns litter the floor. Ken didn't bother bother using them. The heavy iron doors have been forcefully pried open. The slaughter led directly into Alep's private office. Inside, Alef is bound to a chair, bleeding heavily from multiple shallow cuts. Standing right behind him is Ken Noma. His hair hangs wildly over his face, his eyes glowing with manic clarity. He points a stolen Imperial broadsword directly at Luca, accusing the cadet of breaking their hospital promise. Ken grins menacingly. He no longer needs to hide in Gabriel's shadow. His physical limits have been shattered by the stimulants. Luca holds up a hand, ordering Grace and Gabriel to stay back. This is a duel between Arky's practitioners. Ken presses the steel against Alef's throat, warning Luca that attempting a non-lethal capture will get him killed. The madman shifts his stance, raising the long, curved blade with effortless precision. Luca grips the bone dagger tightly, his mechanical arm locking into a combat-ready position. The cadet genuinely smiles. He wanted a chance to test the hyper-compressed bone weapon against a real threat. His cybernetic eye activates, projecting a bright green tactical grid across his entire field of vision. Luca maps the physical geometry of the room instantly, memorizing every desk, chair, and blind spot. He explodes forward, his acceleration shattering the floor tiles as he clears the distance. He brings the dagger down in a brutal arc, but Ken effortlessly parries it away from his core. The blades grind against each other. Ken's eyes lock onto Luca's, reading the cadet's exact center of gravity. Luca forces himself backward. Ken's prophetic positioning is flawless. The madman laughs, realizing the young cadet finally understands exactly how outmatched he is in raw experience. Ken promises to kill Alef the moment Luca makes a single tactical error. Luca drops his stance entirely, radiating a terrifyingly calm aura that confuses the veteran killer. He steps backward slowly, putting a deliberate amount of distance between them. Capturing a man this lethal without killing him is going to require breaking the rules of standard combat. The two predators stare each other down, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on. Luca attacks again, unleashing a flurry of high-speed diagonal cuts designed purely to overwhelm. Ken evades every single strike by a fraction of a millimeter, refusing to let the weapons connect directly. The veteran already figured out the trick. He knows crossing his standard steel against the hyper-dense bone will shatter his sword. Ken counterattacks with blinding speed, forcing Luca to deflect a barrage of shallow, bleeding strikes. Luca grits his teeth. His evasion is delayed because his brain is actively processing too much visual data from the room. The cadet's mechanical eye whirs loudly. He decides to completely alter his cognitive architecture mid-fight. A digital representation of his mind splits in two. He creates a secondary parallel thought process. The primary process handles the immediate physical reality, the swinging blade, the dodging, the footwork. The secondary process runs a continuous high-speed simulation of the room, predicting Ken's movements 3 seconds ahead. Ken charges in closely, his blade aiming directly for the cadet's exposed neck. Luca's vision floods with overlapping neon probability vectors, showing exactly where Ken is about to step. He sees 4 separate futures simultaneously and selects the only path that ends in a non-lethal takedown. Luca drops entirely under the lethal horizontal sweep, moving faster than humanly possible. He drives the hilt of his bone dagger directly into Ken's wrist, violently dislodging the broadsword. Ken's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as his weapon spins uselessly into the air. Luca follows through instantly, burying his metal fist deep into the veteran's solar plexus. Ken Noma collapses to the floor, completely unconscious before his knees even hit the tiles. Gabriel peeks out from the hallway, absolutely stunned that the terrifying assassin was just folded by a teenager. Luca exhales heavily, ignoring the bleeding manager still tied to the chair. He glances at Grace. He knows she watched the entire sequence, recording his forbidden combat style. Grace stands silently near the entrance, her single eye unreadable. The diva now has leverage. Luca stares down at Alef's blood pooling around the chair. The Colosseum's future is no longer his concern. Grace smiles slightly, acknowledging that the arrogant cadet genuinely backed up his threats. Luca looks at Ken's discarded blade. A master swordsman handicapped by cheap cybernetics is a tragedy of war. He walks out of the ruined office, leaving the surviving gangsters to clean up the massacre. 3 days later, the Colosseum officially fractures into warring sub-factions, throwing the sector into chaos. Back at the hideout, Gabriel is a sobbing, bruised mess. Martina didn't kill the cyborg. She just beat him senseless for daring to fail her so spectacularly. Luca ignores the weeping man completely, calmly drinking an apple-flavored juice pouch. Gabriel screams at him, demanding some basic sympathy after being treated like a disposable meat shield. The ghostly memories of Kinuan manipulating Tora flash through Luca's mind. If he shows compassion to Gabriel, he won't be able to sacrifice him when the real war begins. Luca stays cold. Later that night, a short figure wrapped in a heavy cloak and a gas mask enters the private bar. Giselle pulls off the respirator, coughing heavily from the toxic slum air. Gabriel panics, asking Luca why he never mentioned having a beautiful younger sister. Luca glares at him to stay quiet. Giselle confirms she wasn't followed. Joel is too busy celebrating his new status as heir to monitor her movements. She places a highly encrypted digital drive on the counter. Hylas sent her personally to deliver it. It contains the exact destination coordinates of the Ghost Company funds. guns. The true target is finally exposed. The stress is breaking her. Giselle immediately reaches for a bottle of high-proof alcohol to numb the anxiety. She glares fiercely at Luca as he stops her hand. The terrified little girl is gone. She is ready to play the family's lethal game. Giselle pours herself a glass of something that looks like it belongs in an industrial engine block, not a bar. One sip confirms it. The lower sector palate is a mystery she has no desire to solve. Luca pours his own drink, completely unbothered by the toxic sludge passing for alcohol down here. She vents her frustrations immediately. With Hylas out of the picture, Joel has practically glued himself to the manor. Every opportunistic noble is flocking to him, and Giselle is stuck waiting for the legal rights of an adult to build her own faction. Luca looks over his shoulder, entirely unimpressed by her whining. He shuts her down, telling her to stop acting like a know-it-all when she's completely out of her depth. She laughs it off, flashing that arrogant Custoria smile. She thinks she has everything figured out. Luca explains the brutal reality. Building a faction requires the kind of complex neural transmission networks that she can't even legally access. As they leave the bar, Giselle stumbles in her heels, and Luca catches her before she eats the pavement. He offers to escort her to the drone patrol boundary. The lower sector is not a place for rich kids after dark. She smugly flashes a heavy-caliber handgun, claiming she gets top marks in her academy firearm classes. She racks the slide, completely failing to realize that holding a gun doesn't make you bulletproof. Luca stares her down. If she gets her throat slit down here, his head is the one rolling on the chopping block. They walk in silence through the neon-drenched alleyways, the tension between them heavy. Giselle finally apologizes. She just felt suffocated at the estate and wanted an excuse to leave. Luca walks beside her, his mechanical arm whirring softly in the damp air. He understands completely. Growing up in these gutters leaves a permanent mark on your psychology. He remembers the absolute terror of the slums. The darkness here isn't just an absence of light, it is a literal bottomless pit that swallows children alive. He remembers the gangs, the violence, the sheer desperation of trying to survive another night. His eyes are completely void of emotion. He survived by becoming something worse than the monsters in the dark. Giselle looks back at him, realizing for the first time just how wide the gap between their worlds truly is. As she leaves, Luca watches her go, reminding himself of his one absolute rule. Relationships that cloud judgment with affection are a luxury he cannot afford. He refuses to deepen their bond. He turns his back on the glowing city and vanishes into the shadows. The real work begins now. Dropping the civilian act, Luca heads straight for the Akbaran outskirts, a desolate wasteland known as the Ruin Zone. He activates his navigation HUD, tracking the coordinates Hyla sent him via the classified data drive. This is where Dead Ronin used to operate, a shadowy security corporation that dealt exclusively in high-value, untraceable assets. They were the perfect intermediary for the Colosseum's ghost companies to launder Kainuan's funding without triggering imperial flags. By using relics and art instead of credits, anyone below a top-tier official would be completely blind to the money flow. Nikolaos figured it out, which is exactly why the invisible assassin silenced him. Luca stares down into the massive crater. The killers were meticulous, leveling the entire facility to erase their tracks. Out of nowhere, a frail old woman approaches him, offering directions with a suspicious smile. She touches his mechanical arm, her grip entirely too firm for someone her age. Luca's combat optics flare crimson. He doesn't hesitate. He hits her with enough kinetic force to blast her completely out of the doorway. The old woman doesn't die. Instead, massive mechanical spider legs erupt from her back, catching her fall. It is a heavily modified cyborg assassin, grinning through shattered teeth. Luca walks past the crippled operative a moment later. Leaving her alive is a warning to anyone else watching. His heavy boots crunch over the shattered concrete as he pushes deeper into the ruins. The deeper he goes, the more he realizes the absolute scale of the destruction. The entire corporate sector looks like it was hit by an orbital bombardment. He scans the remaining architecture, looking for anything that survived the purge. He zeroes in on a partially collapsed building. If Deadronin left a single mistake behind, it will be in there. He drops into a ruined shaft, using his cybernetics to navigate the unstable terrain. It is tedious, dirty work, but he knows the assassins who took out Nikolaos wouldn't leave obvious clues. He slides down a steep concrete embankment, entering the buried subterranean levels. Landing silently, he immediately sweeps the corridor for residual heat signatures. The tension is suffocating. The enemy interfering with his investigation is extremely cautious. He finds a heavy security vault, the Dronzer corporate logo still barely visible through the dust. He blasts the locking mechanism to pieces, tearing the reinforced metal apart. The office inside is completely wrecked, files and servers deliberately destroyed. But digging through the absolute bottom of the pile, he finds exactly what he needs: 3 undamaged data chips. Before he can secure them, his survival instincts scream at him. He looks up, his pupils contracting as the air pressure suddenly drops. A devastating pillar of concentrated energy vaporizes the concrete right where he was standing a microsecond ago. Luca leaps back, riding the shockwave to clear the blast zone. The dust settles, revealing a heavily armored operative stepping out of the wreckage. A dark cloak conceals their frame, but the sheer intent to kill kill radiates off them in waves. The operative lifts their head, a single glowing pink visor cutting through the gloom. Luca draws Ruina. The custom-heavy pistol locks into his mechanical arm, its internal systems screaming to life. He fires immediately. A massive beam of compressed energy tears through the ruin. The shot is perfectly calculated, leaving the sniper absolutely no room to counterattack. The operative is forced to abandon their position, diving out of the lethal trajectory. Luca follows up instantly, drawing his bone dagger and launching a high-speed aerial assault. The operative is genuinely impressed, casually complimenting Luca's ridiculous growth rate mid-dodge. Luca lands directly in front of him, pressing Ruina's barrel practically against the enemy's chest. The operative evades again, the sheer speed of the movement ripping the concrete beneath his boots. Luca switches ammo types on the fly, flooding the zone with rapid-fire shock rounds. He knows Rick's combat suit can't handle the electrical discharge, forcing the traitor into a highly predictable evasion pattern. He drops from the ceiling, driving the blade down with enough force to split a tank. Luca's eyes glow. He needs to think faster. He violently activates the deepest level of the Arky's combat method, forcefully shutting down his emotional receptors. His brain splits its processing power, turning his entire consciousness into a cold, predictive combat computer. The world slows to a crawl. He maps dozens of potential futures simultaneously based purely on muscle tension and physics. He charges in, completely abandoning defense, knowing exactly where Rick's counterattacks will land before they are thrown. It is a flawless execution of lethal logic. No fear, no hesitation, just math. He swings with absolute killing intent, screaming at the traitor to die for the Empire. Rick is practically giddy, laughing like a maniac as he deflects the devastating blows. They lock blades, the sheer kinetic pressure shattering the ground beneath them. But then Rick does something impossible. He doesn't draw a weapon. Luca's combat HUD flashes a critical spatial warning. Rick vanishes entirely. Not fast movement, total spatial displacement. The Force. Rick is using the exact same teleportation trick that nearly killed Luca during the Academy exam. He reappears right behind Luca, his gauntlet humming with lethal energy, poised directly over Luca's brain. Luca freezes. He can't calculate a scenario out of this. Teleportation breaks the math. Rick gives him an ultimatum. Live as a machine for the Empire or live as a man. He explains his own betrayal. He used to be blindly loyal, but he realized the Empire is a meat grinder that devours its own. Before Luca can answer, a chilling, familiar voice cuts through the tension. Ile Karthika is my friend. Kinuan steps out of the dust, his presence suffocating the entire battlefield. Luca raises his blade, completely unsure if his former master is here to save him or execute him. Rick stares at Kinuan, genuinely baffled that his old mentor tracked him down. The traitor lowers his hand, realizing the power dynamic just shifted permanently. Kinuan stands tall, his long coat snapping in the dead wind. Luca realizes the horrifying truth. Kinuan knew Rick was going to betray them all along. The underground instructor steps forward, the ground cracking under the sheer weight of his aura. He floats down from the ridge, looking less like a man and more like a god of death arriving to collect a debt. Rick challenges him. He asks if Kinuan has finally turned against the Empire as well. The traitor demands to know why Kinuan chose a loyalist like Luca over someone like Ile Karthika, who already hates the system. Kinuan's answer is absolute. Ile is too emotional. He is not suitable for Arky's victima. A double agent requires the precise mechanical mindset of someone willing to sacrifice everything. Kinuan admits he admires Tora and Rick's ambitions, but he cannot let them continue. Luca lowers his weapon slightly, realizing he is standing in the middle of a war he barely understands. Kinuan was never a rebel. The anti-Empire operations were just a massive, calculated act. He explains the horrifying truth of the Imperial Guard. They don't just train soldiers, they wipe their humanity to create living organic computers. Kinuan stands over Rick, his voice completely void of sympathy. Hylos warned Luca to maintain an illogical impurity to survive. That wasn't a warning to defect, it was an instruction manual on how not to become exactly what Kinuan is, a gear in the machine, a weapon with no soul. Luca refuses to accept that fate. He vows to use the Legion, not become consumed by it. Kinuan projects a horrifying hologram of the Imperial Guard's true form, a mechanical shell driven purely by a captive human brain. Rick realizes the absolute depth of his miscalculation. The traitor prepares to fight the man who trained him, knowing he has a 0% chance of survival. Kinuan draws his blade, entirely unimpressed by his former student's resolve. How unfortunate, he whispers. He steps forward, moving faster than the teleportation matrix can even track. Kinuan severs Rick's head in a single, blinding arc of steel. The cut is so clean the armor doesn't even splinter, it just slides apart. Luca is paralyzed by the sudden execution. The master just casually slaughtered one of his own top commanders. Rick's headless body hits the concrete, his rebellion ending in a pool of blood. Luca's mechanical eye stutters, trying to process the sheer efficiency of the kill. Kinuan holds the severed head up, completely unaffected by the gore dripping down his arm. He crushes the helmet, extracting a glowing silver data sphere from Rick's ruined chassis. Kinuan turns to Luca. If Luca had accepted Rick's offer to defect, Kinuan would have killed him too. Instead, he planned to just monitor Luca periodically, adding him to the endless list of Imperial subjects under surveillance. Luca realizes the Master is the ultimate double agent. The entire rebel cell was a controlled experiment. Kinuan admits the Empire is flawed, but tearing down the wall because of a few cracks is suicidal nonsense. He crushes the empty helmet, discarding Rick's legacy like trash. But Kinuan praises Luca. Despite the chaos, despite the constant threat of death, Luca never lost his internal compass. Luca listens, completely exhausted, as the man who ordered his assassination applauds his loyalty. He chose the Empire, even when he knew it was rotten to the core. Kinuan finally reveals his true allegiance. He serves Yuri Krathia, the current emperor. He is not just an instructor, he is an Arches Domini, the eye of the emperor. His word carries the absolute authority of the throne itself. He orders Luca to kneel. Luca drops to one knee, realizing he is standing before a phantom that officially does not exist. Kinuan explains the twisted sociology of the Empire. They allow factions like Nemesis to exist specifically to vent societal pressure. By giving the citizens a fake rebellion, they prevent a real one. We exist nowhere, yet everywhere, Kinuan states, cementing the absolute terror of the Observer Network. A massive holographic projection of the Emperor's eyes fills the ruins, signifying Luca's formal induction. The Empire will never admit to their existence, but their power is absolute. Kinuan sits casually on the rubble, acting like he didn't just alter the course of Luca's entire life. He explains that crushing dissent entirely only causes the pressure cooker to explode. By letting Rick and Nemesis roam free, the Empire successfully identified every genuine traitor in the system. It was a multi-year honeypot operation, and Rick fell for it perfectly. Kinuan looks down at Luca, delivering his final lesson on Imperial control. The human brain lives off hope, not despair. He pours a cup of tea from a thermos, his hands completely steady despite the blood on the floor. If the masses believe they are fighting for a better future, they will happily march into the meat grinder. Rick's dangerous ideals were actually perfectly aligned with the Empire's need for a controlled opposition. Kinuan orders Luca to bring Rick's corpse back to headquarters. It will guarantee him a massive promotion. Even Nikolaos's assassination was calculated, a grand appeasement to keep the dissenting nobles quiet. The highest-ranking officials are completely replaceable, sacrificed whenever the political math demands it. Luca asks if Rick ordered the hit on Nikolaos. Kinuan refuses to answer, reminding Luca of his lowly apprentice rank. Kinuan warns him. Luca is now standing on a razor's edge. One mistake means elimination. The Master's eye gleams with cold authority. Luca will eventually receive a direct summons from the Emperor. Until then, he must suppress all emotion and play his role perfectly. Kinuan vanishes, leaving Luca alone with his blade and a horrifying new reality. Luca establishes a secure connection to Imperial command, reporting the elimination of the high-value traitor. He stands alone in the wasteland, a newly minted phantom of the Empire. The sleek Imperial transport ships arrive, cutting through the smog to extract him. Back at base, he plugs the recovered Dedronin data chips directly into his neural interface. His optics flare as the classified information floods his brain. His clearance upgrades instantly. The 4th rank cross-sword medal is officially bestowed upon him. The sheer volume of raw data hitting his visual cortex is staggering. He holds his head, completely dizzy from accessing files that even chief centurions aren't allowed to see. The system prompts him to lower the exposure level before his synapses melt. He hits yes immediately. He collapses on a medical cot, his brain shutting down for 16 hours straight just to process the trauma. Waking up, the terrifying truth settles in. He is now a gear in a machine that spans the entire universe. The Emperor controls everything, and everyone else is just playing a role in a script they haven't read. He realizes Hylas had absolutely no idea Kinuan was a watcher during Operation Juliet. After recovering, Luca heads to the main hall of the Imperial Guard, summoned by his adoptive father. His new optics effortlessly scan the ranks and specializations of every soldier in the room. He walks through the massive facility, fully aware that this network is completely compromised by the observers. He approaches Hylas's office, preparing to lie to the most dangerous man he knows. He attempts to scan Hylas's data profile, but is instantly blocked by a massive access denied warning. Even with Watcher clearance, the Chief Centurion's mind is a black box. Hylas is waiting for him, his expression completely unreadable. The commander demands the report. No bullshit, just the facts. Luca delivers the fabricated story flawlessly. He claims Rick tried to recruit him, and he refused. He credits his survival entirely to the Arches combat method, perfectly aligning with Hylas's expectations. Hylas listens carefully, his scarred face giving nothing away as he analyzes the boy's pulse and posture. Luca holds his nerve. If Hylas suspects the lie, he will execute him right here in the office. But the lie holds. Luca plays the loyal soldier exactly as Kinuan instructed. Hylas accepts the kill. To a military man, slaughtering a traitor is a feat of war, regardless of the messy circumstances. He confirms the committee will approve the 4th rank cross-sword medal without objection. It is an unprecedented honor, and the Custoria family will host a grand reception to flaunt their new star. Luca stands tall, accepting the praise of a man he is actively deceiving. Hylas tells him to invite Aile and his friends. It's time to play politics. The Akbaran capital glimmers in the night, a sprawling metropolis entirely ignorant of the shadow war occurring beneath it. The royal reception chamber is packed, a sea of tailored suits, expensive dresses, and terrifyingly powerful individuals. Luca attends in full formal uniform, his slum rat aesthetic entirely erased. Giselle glides over, noting that Joel is absolutely losing his mind over Luca's sudden leap in prestige. She adjusts his collar, treating him like a genuine asset for the first time. Luca brushes off the compliment. He knows surviving Rick Heiser was pure luck, not skill. Giselle smirks, enjoying the chaos. Joel is frantically burning through his political favors just to avoid looking irrelevant. Across the room, Joel is sweating bullets, furious that a commoner is stealing the spotlight. Giselle looks stunning in her black dress, entirely comfortable in the viper pit of high society. She tells Luca to stand tall. Today, he is the undisputed face of the Custorias. The heavy oak doors swing open, silencing the room instantly. Hylas enters, his massive presence drawing the attention of every sycophant in the building. The commander notes Giselle's ambition, quietly dismissing her capability to lead a military family. Luca listens, fully aware that tradition dictates power in this empire far more than competence does. Hylas turns to Luca, testing him one last time. He asks if he should just name Joel the successor to avoid conflict. Luca plays the perfect subordinate, stating he has no claim to the position as an outsider. Hylas smiles. It is the exact answer he wanted to hear. The commander agrees. Neither Joel nor Luca have what it takes yet, but Luca's self-awareness is a massive advantage. Hylas reveals he has been assessing Luca objectively since day one. A group of high-ranking nobles immediately approaches, eager to gain favor with the boy who killed Rick Heiser. Luca fakes a polite smile, his mouth practically quivering from the forced pleasantries. Hylas stands proudly beside him, forcing the boy to endure the exact same political theater he hates. Luca realizes that if he wants the power to change things, he has to play the game perfectly. Hylas flashes a demonic grin, reveling in the absolute control he wields over his new weapon. Luca accepts the reality. He will endure the fake smiles if it means securing his future. The crowd parts as director Jin Gao approaches, the eccentric genius running the fourth laboratory. Hylas introduces Luca, treating the director with a rare level of genuine respect. Jin is practically vibrating with excitement, holding up a small, glowing holy stone like a party trick. The man is brilliantly unhinged, possessing the kind of raw intellect that makes him untouchable. Hylas sighs, warning the scientist about carrying volatile energy sources in his pocket. Jin brushes off the concern. He's coated it in a liquid sealant he invented specifically for this purpose. He declares that if they can harness this energy, it will completely revolutionize the three nations. Jin throws his hands up like a maniac, laughing loudly while everyone else stands in rigid silence. Hylas tells the scientist he'll live another century easily with that much chaotic energy. Jin's smile falters slightly. He admits his body is failing him, his mind slowly being corrupted by his own research. But the real shock comes when Jin introduces his date for the evening. Martina, the diva of La Vie en Rose, the ruthless underworld boss who essentially owns the lower sector. She hugs Jin affectionately, playing the role of the devoted girlfriend flawlessly. Luca is completely stunned. The fact that an illegal syndicate boss is sipping champagne with the chief centurion is mind-bending. His cybernetic eye scans her instantly, confirming she has zero noble lineage despite her presence here. She is older than she looks, maintaining her youth through expensive black market modifications. Luca realizes the terrifying truth. Jin's status is so high he can drag a slum gangster into the royal court without consequence. Hylas smiles at the eccentric couple, completely unaware of Martina's true identity. Jin leans heavily on Luca, clearly drunk and entirely oblivious to personal boundaries. Martina clinks her glass, smoothly diverting attention away from the awkward interaction. She notes that getting a hold of Jin is nearly impossible these days, expertly managing his public image. Jin wanders off to find another drink, leaving Martina alone with the boy she recently threatened to kill. She glides over, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Without missing a beat, she demands a dance from the star of the night. She grabs his hand before he can object, dragging him directly onto the center floor. She scolds him for staring at her like an idiot. If he doesn't dance, he'll embarrass the Custoria name. Luca admits he has absolutely zero idea how to dance, and will definitely step on her. Martina's eyes narrow. She isn't taking no for an answer. She expects perfection. She bows elegantly, locking him into a social contract he cannot escape. Luca breaks a sweat. Fighting assassins is easier than navigating a royal waltz. Martina explains that her previous partner literally jumped off the terrace to escape the pressure. They begin to move. To Luca's absolute surprise, his enhanced reflexes make following her lead effortless. He glares at her, knowing she is actively using this public spectacle to corner him. She leans in close, whispering that the diva of La Vie en Rose has traditionally served as the romantic interest for powerful men. Luca realizes the play. Being Jin's partner makes her functionally untouchable by the lower nobles. She spins out gracefully, masking their intense interrogation behind a flawless smile. Luca holds his frame perfectly, his mechanical hand gripping her waist with exact pressure. The entire ballroom watches the elegant display. away, completely unaware of the lethal threats being exchanged. Martina presses close again, proving that incidents in the lower sector are easily covered up if you have the right friends. Luca asks her straight up, is Levian Rose trying to completely rewrite the power structure of the slums? Martina counters. She demands to know why the son of the chief centurion is playing gangster in her territory. Is it just a quirky hobby, or is he planning a hostile takeover? She whispers a very real threat. If he crosses her, Director Jin won't be able to protect him from the consequences. She warns him that the syndicate itself might not be safe anymore. She steps hard on his polished boot, a physical reminder that she is completely in control of this interaction. Luca grins, matching her intensity. They are both playing a massive, lethal game of chess. The song ends. Luca immediately turns and walks away, entirely exhausted by the endless political theater. Martina watches him go, thoroughly impressed by the boy's sheer audacity. Near the bar, Joel watches the interaction, practically vibrating with rage at his own irrelevance. Eli Karthika stands nearby, looking smug as he watches the Custoria siblings tear each other apart. Luca pushes through the heavy double doors, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the ballroom. He needs to process everything Martina just revealed, but his brain is completely fried. He wanders down a dark, secluded hallway, the heavy bass of the reception fading into nothing. The silence is immediate and absolute. He stops abruptly. His enhanced optics pick up a reflection near the massive arched window. A figure is standing in the shadows, radiating an aura that makes Kinuan's presence feel like a light breeze. Luca realizes instantly that whoever this is, they are the one pulling all the strings. A massive red warning flashes across his vision. Access denied. Even with his watcher clearance, he cannot scan her. She turns around, a young woman with a sharp bob cut and eyes that look older than the Empire itself. She smiles, an expression completely devoid of warmth. She doesn't introduce herself. She just tells him to follow her into the garden. Luca follows, his mechanical arm twitching involuntarily. The sheer pressure she emits is paralyzing. They enter an indoor ecosystem, a flawless replica of Earth's ancient environment. She stops at the edge of a massive, illuminated koi pond. Without a word, she steps directly into the water, ruining her expensive shoes. The koi fish immediately swarm her empty hands, conditioned to follow the promise of food. She explains that the fish are fools. They follow blindly, hoping for a reward that doesn't exist. It is a perfect metaphor for the imperial citizens, and Luca knows exactly what she means. The ones who give up get nothing. The ones who follow get fed just enough to keep them loyal. She turns to him, acknowledging that he made the right choice talking to her. Then her voice drops to a chilling calm. She issues an absolute order. Kill every single last one of them. Luca's blood runs cold, but he doesn't hesitate. He steps into the pond. He plunges his mechanical hand into the water, grabbing a thrashing koi. His programming as an observer overrides his hesitation. Yuri watches him closely, her red eyes gleaming in the dark. He crushes the fish instantly. The water turns a violent shade of crimson. He doesn't stop. He grabs another and another, executing them with flawless mechanical efficiency. Yuri smiles, looking absolutely terrifying as the bloody water splashes against her pristine clothes. She tells him it's an order. He is proving his worth as her newest weapon. Once the pond is completely still, she dismisses him casually. Until next time. Luca climbs out of the water, his boots leaving bloody footprints on the immaculate marble. He walks back toward the reception, his nerves entirely fried, completely terrified of the monster running the universe. A week passes, but the psychological weight of that encounter still suffocates him. He returns to the lower sector checkpoint, needing to check on his own small empire. Gabriel meets him in the street, his massive cybernetic frame flanked by security drones. The cyborg tries to act casual, but Luca's patience is completely zero. He tells Gabriel to cut the bullshit and give him the operational report immediately. Gabriel hands over a gang application, explaining that a lunatic named Ulek has violently consolidated power in the Colosseum. Ulek gunned down the old management and is now offering to outsource security jobs to Gabriel's crew. Gabriel complains that Ulek is too smart and might stage a coup if they aren't careful. Luca agrees. They need to solidify the gang's foundation before letting anyone competent take the reins. They arrive at the underground clinic, the neon cross buzzing weakly in the smog. Inside, Ken Noma is still strapped to a medical bed, recovering from his massive stimulant overdose. Luca senses a familiar, lethal presence inside the room. He tells Gabriel to stay out. He pushes the door open, fully prepared for a confrontation. Kinuan is sitting quietly by Ken's bed, his posture entirely relaxed. The Emperor's observer looks up, acknowledging his apprentice without a shred of surprise. Luca demands answers. Why is the man who orchestrated Rick's death sitting with the last remaining evidence of the operation? Kinuan explains that teaching Ken the Archies method was done specifically to fund Nemesis operations. When Rick betrayed the mission, Kinuan was forced to abandon Ken to the wolves to maintain his own cover. He fully intended to execute Ken today, to erase all traces of the double agent operation. But looking down at the broken martial artist, Kinuan hesitates. He genuinely cherished the boy. Since the betrayal, Kinuan has lived under constant suspicion, maintaining his tightrope walk with absolute precision. Luca assumes Kinuan is here to finish the job, given the ruthless logic he preached in the ruins. Kinuan stands up, his expression softening for the first time since Luca met him. He won't kill him. Even if Ken dies from the overdose, he chose that path himself when he attacked Aleph. Kinuan let Ken live because, unlike the cold, mechanical logic of the Empire, Kinuan never forms false bonds. Sparing him is Kinuan's one concession to his own conscience, the illogical impurity that keeps him human. Kinuan states he will take care of Ken personally. It is his responsibility as a master. He warns Luca that killing friends is not something anyone should ever become comfortable with. The master praises Luca's rapid growth. He learns one thing and understands 10. Kinuan vanishes into the shadows, leaving Luca alone with the sleeping patient. Luca realizes that even the Emperor's most perfect weapon still clings to a shred of humanity. Back at the gang office, Grace is lounging casually, keeping a sharp eye on the new recruits. Gabriel is aggressively barking orders at a massive bearded thug, trying to act like a real underworld boss. Luca watches from the corner. Gabriel is useful for now, but until the gang grows to its full strength, Luca must remain the true monster in the shadows. Gabriel's mechanical hand taps nervously against his chair. He is looking for someone highly capable to babysit his new syndicate while he pretends to be a boss. Luca already has the perfect candidate in mind. Walking through the neon-drenched streets of the lower sector, Grace breaks the silence. The Levian Rose enforcer asks Luca a direct question about his history with her boss, Martina Diva. She suspects their paths must have crossed in the underworld long before today. Luca thinks back to his first terrifying encounter with the syndicate leader. He plays it cool, casually admitting he was an irregular cadet from the slums. He claims he seized a rare promotion, avoiding any mention of his true role as an observer. Grace listens carefully, her one visible eye studying his absolute lack of fear. She opens up, revealing that she wasn't the only irregular in her academy year. Since irregulars were so rare, they quickly became as close as siblings. She loved him enough to die for him without hesitation. His name was Ruzen, a prodigy recognized for his compatibility with the Empire's full-armored system, the Legion, a weapon that grants immense power at a terrifying psychological cost. He frequently visited Grace, seeking comfort as the missions took their toll. Grace confesses that she watched Ruzen's humanity slowly evaporate with every deployment. The armor didn't just protect him, it consumed his mind from the inside out. The Empire treats irregulars like disposable tools, grinding them down until nothing is left. The psychological toll shattered him completely. The last time she saw him, he was crying in the middle of the street. He was utterly terrified of losing his own soul to the machine. Grace looks at Luca with a mix of suspicion and genuine respect. Unlike Ruzen, Luca hasn't lost his personality under the crushing weight of the Empire's training. They arrive at Martina's opulent pavilion, cutting the history lesson short. Grace warns him to behave. Martina is not someone you play games with. Inside, the syndicate boss reclines on her velvet sofa, radiating a suffocating level of authority. She toys with Luca, noting how close he and Grace have become in such a short time. Luca doesn't flinch. He demands to know if she will honor their agreement regarding Gabriel. Martina makes her terms absolute. She will protect the gang, but she considers it a long-term investment. Luca grins like a maniac. He knows exactly what kind of lethal political game they are playing, and he fully accepts the terms. With the alliance sealed, Levian Rose officially backs his Shadow Empire. Days later, the political maneuvering gives way to pure, grueling physical conditioning. A notification pings as Luca steps into the private Imperial Guard training room. He pushes his cybernetics to the absolute limit, his synthetic muscles screaming under the strain. He is sweating bullets, entirely focused on mastering the crushing weight of his new position. He analyzes the emblem of the First Centuria, realizing the sheer gap in power he still needs to close. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifts, dropping 10 degrees in a single second. Hylas is standing on the training floor, his massive frame casting a long shadow. The Chief Centurion has just dismantled an entire squad of elite guards without breaking a sweat. Luca watches in awe. Hylas is a literal one-man army, and he isn't even wearing the Legion armor. But something feels different today. The commander's aura is darker, heavier. Hylas turns to his adopted son, his eyes glowing with suppressed violence. He casually proposes a quick sparring session, offering Luca the chance to use his personal weapons. Luca draws his blade, his survival instincts screaming at him to run. Hylas stares him down, the sheer ominous pressure rolling off him in waves. "Don't disappoint me too much," the commander warns. Luca braces himself. A lesson from the Empire's deadliest weapon is about to begin. The scene shifts to the dead of night. An unmarked aerial transport cuts silently through the dense smog. Luca sits in the co-pilot seat, fully equipped in tactical stealth gear. Hylas tosses him a custom, unmarked helmet. Tonight, they are not operating as Imperial Guards. They are operating as the Custoria family, executing a shadow mission that officially does not exist. The target is a highly classified Nemesis contact hiding in the ruin zone. Hylas reveals that this contact was active on the exact day Nikolaos was assassinated. The commander's voice is dead calm, but the implication is terrifying. He is hunting his son's killers. Luca realizes the horrifying tightrope he is walking. He must help Hylas hunt the very rebels Kinuan is protecting. Hylas thought he buried his emotions for the Empire, but the loss of his heir proved otherwise. The matter is strictly family business, which is exactly why Joel was excluded from the operation. Luca knows he has to report all of this to Kinuan later, but right now, he has to play the loyal son perfectly. He cannot afford a single mistake. If Hylas suspects his true allegiance, he will execute him mid-flight. The transport ship drops into a rusted subterranean waste treatment facility. They land in the shadows, moving like phantoms through the abandoned sector. A third man is waiting for them in the gloom, an older operative named Pygon. Pygon is Hylas's secret retainer, an extra pair of eyes and ears that operates entirely off the Imperial grid. He leads them toward the reinforced entrance of the hideout. The mission parameters are brutal. The Nemesis contact will commit suicide the second he realizes he is cornered. They need him alive to extract the financial data. They have exactly 5 seconds to breach, locate, and neutralize him before he swallows a cyanide capsule. Pygon maps the facility layout instantly, highlighting the blind spots and ventilation shafts. He warns Luca that his biological reflexes might slow him down during the initial breach. Luca doesn't bother correcting him. His Arky's combat method makes his biology faster than any machine in the room. They stack up at the entrance, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Pygon initiates the countdown, 5 seconds until total lockdown. Hylas takes the right flank, his massive frame moving with impossible silence. Luca takes the left, his optics scanning through the thick concrete walls. They move, 3 lethal shadows tearing through the rusted corridors simultaneously. 4 seconds. Pygon secures the perimeter, cutting off the secondary escape routes. 3, 2, 0. Luca kicks the reinforced door completely off its hinges. The contact panics, lunging for his weapon, but Luca is already inside his guard. Luca drives the target into the floor, paralyzing his nervous system before he can even blink. He violently activates the Arky's technique, calculating the exact pressure needed to subdue without killing. The Nemesis contact drops cold, total neutralization in under 4 seconds. The target doesn't even twitch as his consciousness shuts down. Luca releases the pressure, confirming the biological readout on his HUD. The room falls dead silent, save for the hum of the ruined machinery. He steps back, his bone dagger never even leaving its sheath. Pygon arrives a moment later, hauling the unconscious target over his shoulder. He is thoroughly impressed by the cadet's terrifying efficiency. Hylas steps out of the shadows, confirming that the digital footprint of the raid has been wiped entirely. The mission is a flawless success. The Custoria family has its prisoner. Pygon assumes Hylas will conduct the torture himself, but Hylas stops him. The commander states coldly that he will not be the one asking the questions tonight. He orders Luca to handle the extraction, testing the boy's stomach for the family's darkest work. Pygon asks if they should extract the memories here. Hylas turns his back, leaving his adopted son to finish the gruesome task. Hylas knows this operation requires a surgeon, not a butcher. The interrogation will be handled back at a secure black site. He orders Luca to follow through on the extraction protocol perfectly. Luca watches him go, realizing the depth of the test he just passed. Pygon chuckles, noting that Hylas must truly value Luca to involve him in such classified family matters. Pygon hauls the target up the access ladder, vanishing into the night. Luca isn't so sure. Hylas might just be using him because he is entirely expendable. As the transport lifts off, Luca reminds himself of his true purpose. He is the Empire's absolute watcher. The transport ship ascends rapidly, disappearing before the local sector alarms can even trigger. 3 days later, Luca arrives at a classified medical bay to review the results of the interrogation. It wasn't an interrogation. The contact's brain has been surgically extracted and wired directly into a mainframe. The horrific brain-in-a-jar setup forces the subconscious memories out through electrical stimulation. The subject is technically alive but entirely vegetative. It is the most efficient way to bypass a courier's mental blocks. How many humans had to end up like this before interrogation became this terrifyingly precise? Luca stares at the pulsing organ, realizing just how ruthlessly Hylas is pursuing revenge. To think an entire human life can be reduced to digital scraps for the sake of vengeance. Even computers leave traces when data is deleted. Human brains are no different. A metallic data drive is dropped into a corrosive chemical bath. The chemical bath glows with a sickly green luminescence. If it stays submerged any longer, the entire chip will corrode into useless slag. The special coating strips the analog encryption layer used by the noble families. Hylas pulls it out perfectly, his armored gauntlet dripping with the toxic sealant. Hylas hands the decoded memory chip directly to Luca. It is a gesture of absolute, terrifying trust. Luca has officially earned his place in the inner circle. Luca slots the drive into the terminal. The holographic display floods the room with fragmented video logs. Hylas explains that the contact was a mementory, a specialized courier. Their long-term memory is deliberately destroyed to prevent massive data leaks if captured. Luca scrubs through the corrupted footage, searching for any recognizable face in the static. The visual data is completely scrambled, a chaotic mess of glitched memories spanning days. It seems completely hopeless. The Nemesis faction covered their tracks perfectly, but his enhanced optics catch a strange sensation, an anomaly that triggers his deepest instincts. He requests the raw data feed feed, wiring the corrupted transmission directly into his own terminal. He realizes Hylas couldn't spot the clue because he lacked the specific context Luca possesses. His mechanical eye filters the static, processing the exact movement patterns hidden in the noise. Instinct isn't a superpower. It is just the brain recognizing a pattern before it can fully articulate it. He pushes the processing power to the limit, stabilizing the corrupted sphere of data. The fragmented image slowly knits itself together in his mind. It is something he knows, but Hylas doesn't. A face from his time at the Krathia Academy. The memory isolates perfectly. A young girl with massive curly red hair steps into the light. Barbara. She is a former academy student, deeply obsessed with Giselle and the missing link to the assassination plot. Luca sits back, exhausted. Hylas would never use Imperial resources for a personal vendetta without absolute proof. The commander orders him to hold his position and focus on his regular duties until they can verify the lead. Luca debates telling Hylas the truth, but playing the Watcher means withholding critical information to observe the outcome. He must report this lead to Kinuan eventually, but not yet. He realizes there is only one natural way to make contact with Barbara without spooking her. Hylas's eye glints in the dark. He has already reached the exact same conclusion. If they play this wrong, Barbara will simply vanish again. They must use the one person Barbara is completely fixated on. They need a bait she cannot possibly resist. The plan is brutally simple. Send Giselle out of Akbaran. Barbara is excessively obsessed with her. If Giselle is exposed, Barbara will undoubtedly take the bait. Luca is genuinely horrified. He asks if the commander is seriously willing to risk his own daughter's life. Hylas counters coldly, reminding Luca that he used Giselle as bait at the academy before. Giselle steps out of the shadows, having listened to the entire debriefing. She accepts the role flawlessly. The honor of the family demands it. She walks to the desk, her expression completely resolute. Luca tries to step in, stating that the atmosphere is far too serious for her to be involved. He tells her they are hunting the ones who ordered the hit on Nikolaos. Giselle's eyes widen slightly. She thought Nemesis acted alone, but the conspiracy goes much deeper. Hylas agrees. They need a massive show of strength so no one ever messes with the Custorias again. Luca killed Rick Heiser, but Rick was just a pawn receiving orders from above. The true mastermind is still hiding in the shadows. Giselle bows her head, fully committing to the operation. She will gladly be the bait. Luca grabs her shoulder, trying to talk some sense into her, but her eyes are dead set on revenge. She reminds him that this is exactly what he proposed to draw Barbara out. Luca breaks a sweat. The situation has completely spiraled out of his control. Giselle tells him to stop worrying. If things go wrong, she will gladly die for him anyway. Luca sighs heavily. Hylas's ruthless logic has officially infected his entire family. The next day, they prepare for the deployment at the massive Custoria estate. Hylas notes that sending Luca out as Giselle's bodyguard would instantly trigger an ambush from Rick's surviving allies. They need someone else to act as her official escort. Luca suggests Ile Karthika. The blonde noble owes him a favor and is powerful enough to handle a strike team. Hylas agrees. Ile is the perfect cover, but Luca still needs to follow them closely to manage the extraction. The commander hands Luca a brand new digital identity file and orders a complete physical disguise. Luca stares at the holographic projection of his new identity, absolutely dreading what comes next. "Are you serious?" he mutters, realizing exactly what kind of cocked-up plan this is. Hylas doesn't blink. It is the best way to disguise an elite assassin in plain sight. The disguise is a complete psychological weapon. Luca is now wearing a tailor-made uniform. Giselle is practically vibrating with amusement, pulling out an eyelash curler to soften his sharp gaze. She tells him to get used to his new name, Kaisa. Luca glares at her, his dignity entirely evaporated. "I am going to kill you after this," his eyes scream. Giselle applies a thick layer of makeup to mask his masculine features. She hands him a choker specifically designed to hide his Adam's apple. "Shut up and wear it, Lucais Custoria," she commands, fully enjoying the moment. Luca sighs. He helped create this plan, so he has to suffer the consequences. But the banter drops quickly. Giselle grips his hand, her bravado fading. She promises that if they get into trouble, they will face it together. She slaps a pair of signal disruptors onto his arms and legs to mask his cybernetic signatures. Luca stares in the mirror one last time. The ruthless shadow boss of the lower sector is officially a maid. He practices walking in the ridiculous outfit, silently swearing vengeance on everyone involved. They arrive at the central spaceport, blending perfectly into the crowd of high society travelers. Ile Karthika spots them immediately, his pristine red military uniform turning heads across the terminal. Ile greets Giselle formally, completely failing to recognize the furious assassin standing right next to her. He assumes the Custorius simply hired a very muscular, heavy-set maid. Giselle initiates the manual guidance protocol for the transport ship, refusing the automated pilot. She takes the pilot's seat, claiming she likes working with machines. She sets the coordinates for Autonovus Labs, perfectly executing Hylas's plan to make her destination public. Luca conceals the Graken boot dagger strapped to his thigh, the only lethal weapon he could sneak past security. Ile leans back, finally realizing who is wearing the maid outfit. He smirks, deeply enjoying the spectacle. He compliments Kaisa on her looks, fully intending to drag out Luca's humiliation for as long as possible. Luca glares at him, silently promising immense violence if Ile doesn't shut his mouth. They arrive at Autonovus Labs, a massive, heavily fortified research facility built directly into a mountain range. The architecture is massive, built to withstand orbital bombardment. It is the perfect place to showcase military-grade prototypes. The security protocols are absolute. Nobody gets past the front gate armed. At the security checkpoint, the automated protocols demand the surrender of all weapons. Ile protests, but the system considers him a red-level threat even when completely disarmed. They are forced to comply, leaving Luca as the only secretly armed operative in the group. They step onto the main floor, joining the elite crowd of nobles and executives. The central exhibition hall is spectacular. The prototype vehicle sits under the floodlights. It is the Arachne, a heavily armored transport capable of transforming its wheelbase into massive mechanical spider legs. The executives explain it can scale vertical cliffs and navigate the most treacherous terrain on the planet. As they tour the facility, Luca scans the crowd relentlessly, his optics searching for any sign of Barbara. He spots someone far more annoying instead. Enrico Lacan, the delusional noble who has been stalking Giselle for months. Enrico hides behind a vending machine, his face flushed and his eyes completely manic as he watches her. Luca assumes the idiot followed them here on his own, dismissing him as a pathetic distraction. That night, they secure a single hotel suite to minimize the defensive perimeter. Giselle offers Luca the bed, fully aware that her maid is currently the most dangerous person in the building. She tries to act tough, claiming she will be fine on the couch for one night. Luca tells her to lock in. This is a lethal mission, not a vacation. They set up the room, ensuring all the blinds are drawn and the exits are covered. Giselle stares at the door, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. She takes a shower, the running water the only sound breaking the suffocating silence of the room. Luca sits in the dark, his synthetic brain running thousands of threat scenarios simultaneously. Giselle emerges in a black nightdress, her confident facade cracking slightly under the sheer terror of being hunted. She admits she is starting to understand the brutal logic of her father's decisions. She asks Luca to sit with her, not as an imperial guard, but as the only person left she actually trusts. She reaches out, needing the physical contact to anchor herself in reality. He sits on the edge of the bed, allowing her to hug him tightly to steady her shaking hands. Luca reassures her, whatever happens tomorrow, he will not let Barbara touch her. The next morning, Ile greets them with a charming smile, acting completely oblivious to the tension. He steps up to pilot the Arachne, volunteering to take Giselle on the high-speed canyon demonstration. As the crowd watches the vehicle prep, Luca's sharp gaze locks onto a maid acting highly suspiciously near the rear exit. Her biological heat signature is erratic, spiking with massive adrenaline levels. The local security completely ignores her, assuming she is just standard staff. The rest of the crowd is fixated entirely on the Arachne's engine, flaring to life. The maid sneaks away from the main floor, turning her face just enough for the light to catch her. The disguise is good, but the aura is unmistakable. A lock of familiar, massive, curly red hair slips out from beneath her cap. Luca breaks away from the group instantly, sprinting down the maintenance corridor to cut off her escape. He charges down the empty hallway, moving with terrifying, silent speed. The break room is completely empty, everyone having left to watch the demonstration outside. He intercepts a confused technician, grabbing him by the collar and demanding to know where the red-haired maid went. Before the man can even process the question, Luca hurls him aside and storms forward. The target is trapped. She realizes she cannot outrun a fully enhanced irregular. She tries to access a secure ventilation shaft, her hands trembling violently as she attempts to open it. Luca moves faster than she can blink, tackling her straight into the metal grate. They hit the floor hard. The maid scrambles backward, completely terrified of the cross-dressing assassin pinning her down. Luca grabs her by the throat, his eyes glowing with lethal intent. He drags her back to her feet, shoving her against the wall. "This Barbara," he mutters, analyzing her biological readouts. The scanners confirm it is her, but Luca's deepest instincts scream that something is fundamentally wrong. She stammers, crying uncontrollably as she claims she is the real Barbara. Luca doesn't have time for a prolonged interrogation. He needs answers immediately. He draws the Graken boot dagger, the bone blade gleaming viciously in the dim light. "I want answers, not screams," he says, pressing the blade down. He promises to skin her alive unless she drops the act and tells him exactly what the plan is. "I'm going to skin you slowly until I hear you begging to get killed." He leans in closer. "That's what you get for pissing me off." The girl panics, her eyes wide with total despair. He drives the dagger straight through her palm. She screams in absolute, genuine agony, blood pooling on the metal floor. The pain shatters whatever resolve she had left. She cracks immediately immediately, screaming that her real name is Neder Elon. Neder begs for mercy, swearing she is just a servant forced into this role. She explains that the real Barbara swapped bodies with someone else on the security detail. Barbara didn't just disguise herself, she completely hijacked Neder's cybernetic body to use her as a remote decoy. The real Barbara manipulated the signals, forcing Neder to act suspiciously specifically to draw Luca away from Giselle. Neder cries that the crazy bitch promised to give her body back if she just followed orders. Luca's blood runs cold. He realizes the entire chase was a meticulously calculated distraction. He knows Barbara is never giving this girl her body back. She is already a ghost. He turns and runs, his cybernetics overloading as he tries to reach the arachne in time. He abandons the bleeding decoy and sprints back toward the test track. He left Giselle alone with the real threat. Back outside, Giselle curses. Neither Luca nor the decoy are answering their communication signals. Ile pushes the arachne prototype toward the rocky terrain, preparing to engage the multi-legged mode. The dashboard flashes a massive red warning sign. Ile realizes someone has forcefully overridden the security protocols from the rear cabin. The vehicle hits the vertical incline, its massive mechanical spider legs deploying automatically to scale the cliff face. But inside the cockpit, Giselle has completely lost control of the navigation system. The arachne lurches upward, climbing the sheer rock face at a terrifying angle. Giselle screams for the rear guard to stop the car, but the operative is already moving. A heavy armored fist shatters the reinforced door lock connecting the cabins. The Autonova's bodyguard kicks the barrier completely open. Giselle shrieks as the armored giant steps into the tight confines of the cockpit. Ile turns around, caught entirely off guard by the sudden breach from an allied unit. The crowd below watches the arachne swerve erratically on the cliff, assuming it is just a dramatic part of the demonstration. The people below think it's a stunt. They have no idea it is an assassination attempt. Inside, the bodyguard proves his combat skills far surpass anything a simple technician could physically execute. He grabs Ile by the collar, overpowering the noble effortlessly. The hijacker violently knocks Ile unconscious with a single, brutal strike to the back of the head. Giselle grabs Ile as he slumps forward, the arachne losing its pilot mid-climb. The vehicle swerves wildly out of control, threatening to plummet off the side of the massive canyon wall. The bodyguard effortlessly bypasses the manual controls, seizing absolute command of the spider legs. He violently kicks Ile out of the pilot's seat with a surge of electrical energy. The blonde noble crashes to the floor, completely neutralized and bleeding. The arachne stabilizes under its new master, towering above the canyon floor. The hijacker turns to Giselle, his armored frame blocking out the sunlight. Giselle stares up at him in total horror as he slowly retracts his heavy visor. Enrico Lacan smiles down at her, his eyes completely unhinged. "It's finally just the two of us again," he whispers. The electrical stun rounds did exactly what they were supposed to do, but they were entirely insufficient. Ile Karthika stands over the paralyzed operative without a single scratch on him. The medical extraction team finally arrives, dropping from the sky to secure the crash site. Luca doesn't wait for the transport to touch down. He plummets straight into the canyon, his stealth approach completely ruined by the frilly maid dress flapping in the wind. He hits the ground with enough kinetic force to crack the rock beneath him. He stands up, his dignity entirely evaporated, glaring at the Custoria siblings who forced him into this ridiculous outfit. Giselle finds the entire spectacle genuinely hilarious. The trap worked perfectly. Enrico and his bodyguard are unconscious but breathing. Giselle orders Ile to use his authority to secure the building. The real threat is still out there. The corporate medical team rushes the scene, practically having a heart attack over the endangered nobles. The chief doctor throws himself on the ground, bowing so hard his glasses nearly shatter. Ile shuts them down immediately. Nobody touches the high-value prisoners without his explicit clearance. He suspects the medical team itself might be compromised. Giselle steps forward, coldly stating she will take full legal responsibility for the extraction. Minutes later, the Imperial transport ship streaks across the sunset. Inside the heavy cargo bay, Enrico and his massive bodyguard remain securely strapped to the reinforced seats. Enrico slowly regains consciousness, groaning as the heavy sedative wears off. Giselle's demeanor flips in a microsecond. The calculating noble vanishes, replaced entirely by a terrified, helpless victim, shedding fake tears. Enrico buys it completely. His delusional obsession blinds him to the predator sitting right in front of him. Giselle lies straight to his face, telling him his newly hired bodyguard died in the crash. She sweetens the lie, offering him a dinner date once he recovers. The fool smiles. He has absolutely no idea how close he just came to being erased from existence. With Enrico handed over to his family, the real interrogation begins. Giselle leads Luca into the secure hold, her expression dropping into pure venom. The massive cybernetic bodyguard isn't dead. It is chained to the floor, laughing like a maniac. Giselle reveals the horrifying truth. That is not the man Enrico hired. It is Barbara. The wanted criminal hijacked the man's cybernetic body to use him as a remote meat puppet. The puppet grins, completely unbothered by its capture. Luca steps up. He finds the body-snatching tactic absolutely repulsive. The cyborg laughs, hinting that it knows Luca is playing his own twisted role. Giselle drops the real bombshell. Barbara is not a rebel. She is is a deep-cover spy for the Empire. Luca draws his blade. He demands the name of the mastermind behind Nikolaos's assassination. Barbara smiles, dropping the intel specifically because she knows Giselle is listening. She warns them that the truth will completely shatter the Custoria family. Luca grabs the puppet by the throat, pressing the bone dagger against its synthetic skin. Barbara warns him again. Digging into this conspiracy will force a war they cannot survive. She has already surrendered her biological form. She does not care what happens to this disposable shell. Luca agrees to her terms. She gave the name, she gets dropped off. The transport hovers over a massive, rusted scrapyard in the lower sector. They drop the hijacked body straight into the garbage. Luca watches her fall, silently ordering her to keep serving the Empire. But he makes one thing clear. If her madness compromises the mission again, he will execute her himself. Back inside, Giselle assumes Barbara simply escaped. She cannot be told the truth of the spy network. Aile adjusts his collar, confirming the covert mission is officially a success. He promises to keep his mouth shut. He owes Luca his life. 2 days later, the heavy oak doors of the Custoria mansion swing open. Luca enters the Silver Moon Chamber, a highly restricted vault accessible only to the head of the family. Hylas is waiting. The sheer volume of classified secrets passing between them is rapidly escalating. Luca knows the reality. To protect these secrets, Hylas only needs to permanently silence one person. The chief centurion demands the report on Barbara's missing body. Luca plays the loyal soldier perfectly, claiming he disposed of it in the wastelands. Hylas accepts the lie. A useful tool of the Empire shouldn't be wasted over a personal vendetta. But Luca advises the commander to issue a strict warning. Barbara's obsession with Giselle is becoming a liability. Hylas agrees, but shifts his focus to the actual target. He asks Luca to confirm the mastermind's name. Luca doesn't hesitate. Vauzakanen. Hylas sits heavily on the couch, the revelation hitting him like a physical blow. Vauzakanen was Nikolaos's direct superior in the military hierarchy. The betrayal came from the top. Later, in the private training facility, Luca pushes his organic body to the breaking point. He moves his cybernetics with terrifying fluidity, forcing his human muscles to keep pace. His philosophy is simple. The human brain is still the most efficient computer in existence. He throws a blistering combination of strikes, his fists breaking the sound barrier in the confined space. The reinforced floor tiles literally shatter under his footwork. He is sweating profusely, fully aware that to survive the upcoming war, he cannot rely solely on the machine. A servant interrupts, apologizing for the noise. His HUD flashes with a new notification, a scheduled duel with Joel Custoria. Luca steps into the grand hall, fully dressed and completely unbothered. Joel is waiting in the center of the room, flanked by his entire entourage. The legitimate heir brought an audience specifically to humiliate the adopted commoner, but Luca notices someone far more dangerous watching from the balcony. Eva Custoria. Her cold, reptilian gaze makes his skin crawl. She is the true venom in this family. Joel smirks, flexing his fully cybernetic arms, absolutely convinced he holds the superior power. Joel lunges first, launching a devastating right hook aimed straight at Luca's jaw. Luca sidesteps it effortlessly. The strike is powerful but painfully predictable. Joel follows up with a heavy slam, trying to crush Luca's organic chest with raw mechanical force. The shockwave rattles the hall, forcing Joel's lackeys to cover their faces. Luca emerges from the dust entirely unharmed. He hasn't even drawn a weapon. Joel realizes his mistake instantly. Unlike him, Luca's head and chest are still organic. Joel floods his cybernetics with energy, attempting to overwhelm Luca with a barrage of rapid-fire strikes. It is a desperate play. Joel knows he cannot win a tactical exchange. Luca slips under the barrage, his synthetic eye tracking every single movement before Joel even commits. Joel throws a feint, hoping to catch the cadet off guard. Luca doesn't fall for it. He drives his knee straight into Joel's armored chest with terrifying precision. He follows up with a brutal downward strike, slamming Joel directly into the marble floor. Joel screams in agony as his cybernetic arm sparks and malfunctions under the crushing weight. Luca pins him down, completely immobilizing the arrogant noble in front of his own followers. He twists Joel's arm right to the breaking point. The duel is absolutely over. Ava watches from the balcony, her expression tightening into pure disgust. Joel's cronies are paralyzed with shock. They expected a demonstration of power, not an execution. Joel grits his teeth, utterly humiliated, fully aware he just lost everything in front of his mother. Luca stands up casually, dusting off his shirt like he just took out the trash. He looks down at Joel, his eyes completely void of sympathy. He deliberately stops before inflicting permanent damage. It is a calculated act of mercy to assert absolute dominance. Joel screams at him, his pride entirely shattered by the display of restraint. The cronies look at Luca like he is a monster. Even without full cybernetics, his presence is completely inhuman. Luca ignores them. People instinctively fear what they cannot understand. Ava dismisses the crowd, her voice carrying the absolute authority of the matriarch. She approaches Luca, her fake smile failing to hide the venom in her tone. She touches his face, complimenting his skills while silently calculating how quickly she can dispose of him. Luca stares back, fully aware that this woman is a literal snake waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As she walks away, Luca realizes his exact position in this house. Hylas, Nikolaos, Joel, and Giselle, they are a family. He is just a rented weapon. Later, Luca packs his gear, preparing to leave the suffocating atmosphere of the mansion. Giselle intercepts him, promising to visit him in the lower sector soon. Luca snaps at her. The slums are not a playground for bored royalty. Giselle laughs it off, claiming it will be strictly business. She thrives on the danger. Before he leaves, Luca is summoned back to Hylas's private quarters. He finds the commander sitting in the dark, entirely relaxed in his civilian clothes. Hylas reveals his decision. The investigation into Vao's Akanan is temporarily suspended. Vao is a man of the palace. Moving against him now would alert the Emperor's inner circle. Hylas states his next move. He is going to announce Joel as his official successor. It is a calculated play to prevent Joel from descending into total paranoid madness. Hylas looks at Luca, testing the boy's reaction to being passed over for the inheritance. Luca answers perfectly. If he were offered the position, he would refuse it anyway. He claims he lacks the ambition to lead a military family. He prefers the shadows of the lower sector. Hylas squints, analyzing the lie. The boy who survived the ruins should be far more power-hungry than this. The commander chuckles, pouring another cup of tea. He appreciates the boy's absolute refusal to take the bait. Luca stares into his cup, silently wondering if his trust in Hylas is genuine, or if the Empire simply programmed him to feel it. The next day, Luca is summoned to the upper city. Hylas is waiting for him, discussing the finer details of tea brewing like they aren't orchestrating a shadow war. The commander enjoys the bitter taste. It keeps his senses sharp. Hylas shifts the topic, dropping a massive piece of intel casually. The Custoria family has not committed treason, but they have operated outside the Empire's surveillance grid. Luca's heart stops. Hylas is openly admitting to unrecorded operations directly to an Imperial observer. The commander states that the Custorias and their leader are completely dedicated to the throne. Luca realizes this is a loyalty test. Hylas is checking if Luca will report this conversation to Kanwan. Hylas makes it clear. He puked up every piece of information during his own interrogations to survive. He expects Luca to do the same. Play the game, survive the observers, protect the family. Luca walks away from the meeting, his nerves completely frayed from skating the edge of execution. Kinuan is waiting for him in the shadows of the training facility. The master strikes without warning, a blindingly fast sword swing aimed directly at Luca's neck. Luca parries it instantly, the sheer kinetic force pushing him back across the smooth floor. Kinuan is impressed. Hylas must truly trust the boy to dedicate so much time to sparring with him. The master lowers his blade. The warm-up is over. Kinuan delivers the mission. A member of the Imperial family has specifically requested Luca as an escort. It makes absolutely zero sense. There are hundreds of elite guards far more qualified for a royal detail. Luca accepts the assignment, his instincts screaming that this is a trap. A heavy stealth transport drops out of the sky, landing silently on the private pad. Luca boards the ship, fully expecting a terrifying political operative. Instead, he finds a young girl with short purple hair, lounging casually on the leather seats. She introduces herself as Ivan, smiling with an intensity that completely unsettles him. She toys with him, asking him to pick a nickname for her since her real name is too long. Luca selects Ivan. She claps her hands, delighted by the choice. The transport descends into the suffocating smog of the lower sector. They walk through the neon-drenched slums. The contrast between the royal and the gutter is completely absurd. Ivan tells him to drop the formalities. She wants to be treated like a normal citizen. Luca refuses. His programming as a soldier demands he maintain protocol. She pouts, entirely amused by his rigid, inflexible nature. He guides her through the safest routes, avoiding the gun-wielding syndicates and sticking to the pickpocket zones. Ivan stops to take a selfie, completely treating the lethal slum like a theme park attraction. She buys street food, grinning as she forces Luca to relax and enjoy the disgusting local cuisine. She stops at a grimy skewer stand, absolutely thrilled by the atmosphere. Luca warns her to check her bill. The vendors down here will rob a naive tourist blind. They pass a massive decorative koi pond. The fish breach the surface, begging for food. Ivan stares at the fish. Her eyes darken. It's too loud. Kill it. Luca freezes. The sudden psychopathic command shatters the tourist illusion instantly. Before he can react, a massive thug bumps into them. Entirely unaware, he just touched royalty. The brute screams at Ivan, demanding an apology for blocking the street. Ivan smiles softly, asking Luca if he is going to kill the man for disrespecting her. Luca grabs the thug by the throat, hoisting the massive man off the ground with pure synthetic strength. He doesn't kill him, but he terrifies the brute enough to send him running. Ivan laughs. She finds Luca's hesitation genuinely fascinating. They rent a room in a deeply shady, unmanned motel. It is the only place in the sector that guarantees total privacy. The room is cheap, entirely unsuited for someone of her status. Ivan doesn't care. She takes off her cap, her purple hair falling loose. She tells Luca to dim the lights. She needs to wash up. Luca turns around, and when he looks back, Ivan's entire body is glowing with an unnatural light. Her physical form breaks down, shifting entirely into a mass of liquid metal. She reforms completely naked, her voice dropping an octave as she issues a direct challenge. She demands to know if he will defy her absolute orders. Luca stands his ground. He refuses to flinch in the presence of whatever whatever monster she truly is. She laughs, deeply enjoying his defiance. She hates subservient dogs. Fully dressed again, she demands they keep walking. She wants to feel the miserable heat of the slums. She looks at the desperate citizens below, amused by their frantic struggles to climb the social ladder. She admits she only finds the struggle beautiful because she is entirely removed from it. They end the tour near a massive commercial block. The sun is setting behind the smog. Luca tells her the truth. He has no good memories of this place. The slums only breed tragedy. Kinuan is waiting for them in the shadows of the alleyway. The master has arrived to retrieve the VIP. Kinuan grabs a hidden thief by the face, casually breaking his jaw before the man can even pull a weapon. Ivan is delighted. She thanks Luca for the entertainment and steps toward the extraction point. She promises to grant him whatever it takes to compensate for his suffering, calling it a gift. As she leaves, Luca realizes the horrifying truth about Ivan. 2 days later, Kinuan escorts Luca to the absolute center of the universe, the Imperial Palace. The architecture is impossibly grand, glowing with the suffocating red light of the Krathia bloodline. Every inch of the facility screams absolute authority. The Emperor, Yuri Krathia, stabilized the empire through ruthless diplomacy and advanced alien technology. Kinuan smiles. The empire doesn't blindly resist change. It absorbs it, weaponizing the alien tech for its own survival. They walk through the grand corridor. The security cameras track them for a moment, then shut down entirely. Kinuan reveals the ultimate privilege of an observer. They do not exist on the network. The electronic eyes of the empire simply ignore their presence. The Emperor sees everything, and the observers are the Emperor's eyes. Luca feels dizzy from the sheer scale of the power structure he has just entered. Kinuan tells him to relax. Even if he messes up protocol today, he won't be executed immediately. They arrive at the heavy gilded doors of the throne room. Luca drops to one knee immediately. "We greet thee, Emperor Yuri Krathia." But the voice that answers is male. Luca raises his head. The man sitting on the steps below the empty throne is not Yuri. It is Franzek Krathia, the Crimson Prince, the publicly known successor to the Empire. Franzek looks down at Luca, extremely pleased with Kinuan's newest recruit. The prince is famous for his charisma and his unyielding support among the citizens. Seeing him in person, the aura of leadership is undeniable. He jokes with Kinuan, their banter feeling warm, almost like a genuine father and son. Luca watches them, deeply unsettled that the men running this cold, mechanical empire act so amicably in private. Franzek excuses himself, refusing to intervene in the secret business of the Watchers. As the heavy doors close behind the prince, the atmosphere in the room drops below, freezing. Kinuan turns to Luca. His death will change everything. Luca freezes. His brain cannot process the words he just heard. Kinuan's eyes are completely dead. He states that when the time is right, he will carry out the order. They are planning to assassinate the crown prince. The beloved heir to the empire is just a sacrificial trigger. The master explains the horrifying depth of the empire. The true crown prince exists elsewhere. Kinuan looks down at his apprentice, delivering his first absolute command. "Would you be able to kill the crown prince for me?" Luca realizes the trap. He knows exactly what answer is required to survive this room. He admits his rebellious nature, claiming he has a tendency to veer off course when authority demands blind obedience. But he accepts the order anyway. Doing dirty deeds in the dark is his duty as a watcher. Kinuan smiles. The boy is incredibly sharp. He passed the ultimate test of resolve. A voice echoes from the shadows behind the throne. "Well said." Ivan steps into the light, dressed in royal attire, her purple hair unmistakable. Emperor Yuri Krathia. The girl he escorted through the slums is the absolute ruler of the universe. She laughs, asking if Luca would wed her if he weren't so terrified of her. She admits she is cruel, moody, and eccentric. She knows exactly how terrifying she appears to others. Luca stares at her. She is a viper, a snake that lures its prey with beautiful colors before sinking its fangs in. Yuri smiles. She does not intend to be expended by the political machine. If she dies, it will be by her own will. She is the ultimate predator in this ecosystem. Luca returns to his quarters late that night, completely exhausted by the relentless psychological pressure. He collapses on his bed, realizing he is now the personal weapon of the most dangerous woman alive. He is being graded on criteria he doesn't even know exist. He rubs his temples, his brain overloaded. Thinking about the conspiracy won't save him right now. A sharp notification flares directly across his retinal display. It is an emergency override message from Gabriel. "Luca, your little sister is here. Giselle Custoria is in the lower sector, alone." Luca bolts upright, grabbing his coat and tearing out of the apartment before the message even finishes reading. He sprints toward the abandoned factory district, cursing Giselle for being so recklessly stupid. As he reaches the reinforced doors, a distinct, highly lethal scent hits his nose. Gunpowder. He draws Ruina instantly as the massive steel doors blow outward in a storm of fire and shrapnel. The deafening explosion blows the doors wide open, but it isn't gunpowder. It is confetti. Luca stands in the breach, Ruina drawn, his adrenaline redlining for a combat scenario that does not exist. The lethal shadow operative of the lower sector is entirely paralyzed by a room full of gangsters wearing party hats. Giselle sits at the bar, swirling a drink, thoroughly enjoying the psychological damage she just inflicted on him. Grace steps out of the crowd, crowd, handing him a neatly wrapped box on behalf of the syndicate boss. Luca slowly lowers his weapon, his synthetic brain struggling to process the sheer absurdity of a surprise birthday party. A heavy glass of amber liquid is shoved into his hand before he can even argue. He mutters a quiet curse, realizing his adoptive sister manipulated his deepest protective instincts just to get him here. Gabriel's mechanical crew sings completely out of tune, the syndicate growing stronger under the banner of celebration. The entire operation is running flawlessly, mostly due to Martina Diva's invisible hand stabilizing the territory. Grace watches him from the stool, reminding him that Le'Veon Rose expects a return on this investment. The syndicate boss is babysitting Gabriel's empire, but the debt is entirely Luca's to pay. He sits down beside her, the loud atmosphere of the bar contrasting with their dark conversation. He shifts the topic immediately, asking if she dug up any fresh intelligence on her old friend Ruzin. Grace lowers her eyes. The question was a test, and she knows exactly why he is asking. She reads his intentions flawlessly, promising to deliver the intelligence the moment it surfaces. The neon lights of the bar reflect off the high-end liquor bottle as the night deepens. Jizzle interrupts the quiet exchange, slipping onto the stool next to them with a flush on her cheeks. In the background, one of Gabriel's massive cyborg enforcers takes a playful paper fan smack to the head. Jizzle leans in closer to Luca, her eyes heavy with alcohol and unfiltered curiosity. She playfully suggests that a man like him might finally be interested in something other than violence. Luca snaps back, completely immune to her drunken teasing. He refuses the bait, but Giselle is a master at forcing people into uncomfortable social corners. She stares him down, challenging the stoic assassin to drop his guard for just one night. Her gaze sharpens. She isn't just teasing anymore. She is actively calculating his emotional boundaries. The tension between them shifts from sibling rivalry to something far more complicated. She leans forward, practically whispering as she challenges him to a drinking game. Luca accepts, completely underestimating the absolute terror of a bored noblewoman. He realizes his mistake instantly as she demolishes him in rock, paper, scissors with ruthless efficiency. Jizzle claims her prize, asking him directly about his relationship with the one-eyed enforcer. Luca doesn't flinch. He labels Grace a strict business partner and nothing more. Jizzle smirks, noting that business partners rarely look at each other with that specific kind of gravity. She points out that Grace never pries into his dark secrets, making her the perfect companion for a liar. Luca fires back, demanding to know why Giselle dragged him into the slums for a fake birthday. Her smile vanishes. The playful facade drops, revealing the raw resentment boiling underneath. She accuses him of being a hypocrite. He lied to her, used her as bait, and left her entirely in the dark. Luca takes a slow sip of his drink, his expression turning ice cold. He states the brutal truth of their world. Everyone is a tool for someone else. Jizzle grits her teeth. She hates his cold logic, mostly because she knows he is absolutely right. She changes the subject to Gilda, the manic mechanic currently showing off her engineering skills in the middle of the bar. Jizzle sees immense potential in the pink-haired engineer, knowing skill like that rots in the lower sector. She announces her plan to forge a partnership and build her own empire, completely independent of her father's shadow. Luca realizes the little girl he saved from the ruins is rapidly evolving into a ruthless political player. He warns her that he won't always be there to clean up her messes. Jizzle stands up, throwing her coat over her shoulders. She never asked him to be her shield. She walks out into the neon rain, leaving the assassin to process the shifting dynamic. Luca finishes his drink, the weight of her ambition settling over him. Later that night, the heavy transport ship returns him to the Imperial Guard barracks. His organic body is covered in a jagged map of scars, each one a receipt for surviving the impossible. He runs a towel over his neck, staring at the physical limits of human biology in the mirror. He has pushed this flesh shell to the absolute maximum. It cannot naturally grow any stronger. To survive the monsters hunting his family, he knows he will eventually have to switch to a full-body cybernetic. The next morning, the elite cadets assemble in the pristine halls of the Imperial Guard facility. Ile Karthika greets Luca with a wide, arrogant smile, thoroughly enjoying his guaranteed top spot in the class. Luca ignores the posturing. Killing the rebel leader put him on a pedestal the nobles simply cannot comprehend. Ile may have the political backing, but Luca has the actual body count and the field experience. The blonde noble turns away, his competitive blood boiling. He desperately wants to face Luca in a real deathmatch. The heavy doors open. Hyla steps onto the floor, his massive presence instantly silencing the room. The chief centurion leads them deep into the absolute core of the Empire's military might. He explicitly orders all recording devices disabled. What they are about to see does not officially exist. The vault doors retract, revealing the true terrifying scale of the Imperial arsenal. Vestia, a towering full-body cybernetic frame that makes standard military gear look like archaic scrap metal. Caligo, the newest generation chassis, built purely for catastrophic close-quarters annihilation. Hylas explains that the neural wiring Joel used is installed in these suits by default. Hector, the close combat specialized Legion armor, radiating a suffocating red energy from its core. Achilles, the light frame multi-purpose model designed to butcher entire platoons with blinding mobility. Hercules, the artillery specialist, walking destruction construction capable of leveling a city block without reloading. Luca stares at the machines, his synthetic eye calculating the raw kinetic output. He realizes a grim truth. The Archies fighting method cannot physically coexist with the Legion system. The sheer neuro load of operating both simultaneously would instantly liquefy a human brain. Hylas stands in the shadow of the metal giants, his voice dropping into a dangerous philosophical register. He warns them that discarding their irrational human impurities is the fastest way to get devoured by the machine. Luca closes his eyes. He is the ultimate weapon, but he must preserve the very humanity he planned to discard. After the tour, Hylas dismisses the cadets and orders Luca into his private office. The heavy reinforced doors slide shut, sealing them inside a soundproof void. The commander drops the formalities immediately. The topic is Vao Zakanan. The name hangs in the air. The man suspected of ordering Nikolaus's assassination is still breathing. Hylas reveals that he tried to use the Custoria family's political weight to arrest Vao, but the push was silently blocked. Someone much higher up the chain is shielding the traitor from the Imperial Guard's jurisdiction. Hylas clenches his jaw. He knows he is crossing a lethal line by dragging Luca into this. The commander has broken the ultimate taboo. He used his military authority for a private blood feud. Luca listens carefully, understanding exactly why Vao has not been executed yet. If a high-ranking spy was exposed but kept alive, it means the Empire intends to use him for a greater purpose. Interfering now would mean directly disrupting a classified Imperial operation. Hylas stares out the massive window, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "But Luca," the commander whispers, his eyes glowing with terrifying intensity. "Nikolaus is my son." The mask of the loyal soldier shatters completely. A grieving father demands justice, regardless of the Empire's plans. Luca bows his head. He promises to do whatever it takes to help his adoptive father cross the line. 3 days later, the neon-drenched streets of the upper commercial district are packed with oblivious citizens. Luca watches from the shadows. He has been tracking Vao Zakanan meticulously. The target's schedule is completely robotic. Work, home, not a single deviation. Luca realizes the man is far too careful. He needs to aggressively force an error in Vao's flawless routine. He steps into the crowded crosswalk, pulling his hood low to mask his synthetic eye. He accelerates, calculating the precise angle needed to force a physical collision without looking intentional. He slams his shoulder directly into Vao's chest, hitting him with the force of a battering ram. The high-ranking noble stumbles hard, his expensive leather briefcase flying out of his grip. Luca drops quickly, pretending to scramble for the scattered documents while his hands move with terrifying speed. He apologizes profusely, his voice completely masking the lethal operative hiding beneath the hood. Vao glares down at him, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated loathing. Luca hands the briefcase back, his fingers deliberately lingering on the handle for a fraction of a second. Vao snatches it away, his knuckles turning white as he suppresses the urge to murder the clumsy peasant in public. The noble's aura spikes with violent intent. He despises the lower class touching his belongings, but he holds his tongue, turning on his heel and storming away into the crowd. Luca slips back into the alleyway, watching the target disappear into the smog. The brief contact was all he needed. The physical proximity confirmed the violent monster hiding inside Vao's pristine suit. Pygon materializes from the shadows, adjusting his cap as he analyzes the brief interaction. The old retainer chuckles. The target is wound extremely tight. He is bound to snap soon. They walk together through the downpour, blending perfectly into the miserable atmosphere of the city. Vao's massive penthouse towers above them. For a man of his status, it is merely a place to sleep. Pygon looks up at the rain, randomly shifting the conversation to the sociological structure of the Empire. He explains that the strict division between the upper and lower sectors wasn't born out of elitism. It was designed specifically to isolate the chaos. The Empire is a perfect machine that fears stagnation above all else. Pygon smiles, his old eyes gleaming with decades of classified wisdom. Change is the closest thing to perfection. The Empire intentionally pulls irregulars from the gutter to inject unpredictable chaos into its rigid hierarchy. Luca glares at the old man. The philosophical lecture is just a smokescreen for a much darker question. Pygon finally drops the act. He asks point blank about the irregular named Rausen. The rain hits Luca's face. He doesn't hesitate or soften the blow. He died. Pygon nods slowly. It confirms what he suspected. Men without the capacity to defy their superiors rarely last long. Luca pulls his hood tighter. He realizes he is going to have to look Grace in the eye and deliver the devastating news. The moment is shattered by a sudden notification. Vao Zakanan's signal is moving. Luca raises his rifle scope, tracking the sleek black transport ship tearing through the neon skyline. The holographic tracker flares blue. The micro-transmitter Luca planted on the briefcase is transmitting perfectly. The target is moving aggressively fast, burning massive amounts of credits just to travel in total secrecy. Luca drops the rifle and leaps off the edge of the skyscraper without a second thought. He plummets toward the street below, his coat snapping violently in the wind. Pygon dives after him, the old man matching the cybernetic assassin's impossible descent perfectly. They hit the rooftop below, transferring their kinetic momentum into a full-speed sprint. Pygon grins, thoroughly impressed by the rookie's omnidirectional mobility training. Luca pushes his synthetic muscles to the red line. He refuses to lose the target in the maze of the lower city. They leap across the massive industrial gaps, moving like twin shadows through the torrential downpour. The chase leads them deeper and deeper into the abandoned zones, far past the standard red light district. They land on a rusted overhang, watching the black transport descend into a completely ruined sector. Pygon wipes the rain from his face, realizing exactly where the High Noble has chosen to hide. The Akbaran ruins, a graveyard of shattered concrete and lawless violence where the absolute worst of the Empire gathers. An Imperial official stepping foot in this hellscape is a massive red flag. Pygon trusts Luca's unnatural intuition. In a place devoid of surveillance, instinct is the only thing keeping them alive. Vao has a 2-minute head start inside the crumbling structure. Luca takes the point, his hand resting casually on the grip of his blade as they approach the heavy metal doors. A massive cyborg bouncer blocks their path, his mechanical jaw grinning as he recognizes they do not belong here. Pygon plays the oblivious customer, smoothly lying about hearing of the establishment through word of mouth. The bouncer scoffs. The venue is strictly reservation only. Another heavily armed guard steps up, pointing his weapon directly at Luca's chest. I don't mind if he dies. The atmosphere shatters. Luca moves before the guard's brain can even send the signal to pull the trigger. He closes the distance in a microsecond, slipping entirely beneath the guard's line of sight. The bouncers realize too late that they just provoked a monster. Luca shoves his bone dagger directly into the leader's synthetic throat, pinning him against the rusted wall. The terrifying multi-eyed cyborg freezes, the razor-sharp edge resting precisely over his vital wiring. Luca doesn't shout. His voice is dead calm, which makes the threat infinitely more terrifying. Tell me before I tear out your throat. Pygon stands back, watching the rookie effortlessly dismantle the local security hierarchy. Luca applies pressure to the blade. He isn't asking for permission to enter anymore. The metal skin groans under the blade. The guard begs for his life, his tough guy persona entirely evaporated. Luca pulls the blade back a fraction of an inch. We just have business with one of your customers. The terrified guard eagerly agrees to lead them through the pitch-black industrial corridors. They march deeper into the subterranean maze, the air growing thick and suffocating. Luca covers his nose. His enhanced sensors pick up a highly repulsive metallic odor flooding the hallway. The guard awkwardly apologizes for the lack of ventilation, sweating profusely under Luca's lethal gaze. They arrive at a heavy reinforced door at the end of the corridor. The smell of fresh blood is undeniable now. A horrific scream tears through the metal, silencing the entire hallway. Luca and Pygon lock eyes. The noise inside is the sound of a human being completely broken. The screaming intensifies, shifting into a desperate, gargling plea for mercy. Luca doesn't hesitate. He kicks the reinforced door clean off its hinges. The heavy metal slams into the floor, revealing the nightmare hiding inside. A woman with manic, glowing eyes stands over a bleeding man, revving a massive, blood-soaked chainsaw. The guard panics, screaming at the deranged torturer for leaving the door unlocked again. The woman laughs hysterically. She loves the audience. She only deals in 100% organic humans. The victim on the floor wails in absolute agony, begging to be locked back in his cage. Luca stares at the atrocity, his expression hardening into pure, unfiltered disgust. He steps fully into the room, his eyes scanning the absolute carnage surrounding them. The torturer shrieks in anger, deeply offended that an intruder interrupted her masterpiece. Luca doesn't utter a single word. He steps forward and drives his fist directly into her face. With the psychopath subdued, Luca turns his attention to the terrified customer hiding in the corner. The man in the corner is wearing a pristine white dress, trembling uncontrollably beneath heavy makeup. Luca demands to know why the Custorias are here, fully expecting this man to be Vao Zakanan. Luca drops him in sheer frustration, placing his boot directly on the decoy's chest. He presses the barrel of his heavy pistol straight against the man's forehead. The decoy hyperventilates, realizing he is seconds away from getting his brains blown out. Luca points to a mutilated corpse hanging from the wall. The victim bears a striking resemblance to Nikolaos. Luca demands to know why this pathetic stand-in ordered the assassination of the Custoria heir. The decoy is completely bewildered. He has absolutely no idea who Nikolaos is. Luca loses his patience. He has no time for a liar playing dumb. The man screams, finally cracking under the overwhelming fear of immediate execution. The decoy confesses everything. He knows Luca is the adopted Custoria son and begs for a noble negotiation. He admits the sick truth. The man hanging on the wall wasn't a political hit. It was a sick fetish meant to resemble Vao's former lover. The decoy cries that Vao used him as a political meat shield and threw him aside when things got dangerous. Luca lowers the gun slightly. The story is too pathetic and specific to be a lie fabricated under pressure. The decoy wails, his heart genuinely broken by the traitor who abandoned him in this hellhole. Luca realizes Vao Zakanan knew he was being tailed. He intentionally led the Custoria assassin to a dead end. He points the gun back at the decoy's head, demanding the connection between Vao and Nemesis. The decoy sweats, preparing to spill the final secret. A massive spike of biological energy detonates behind Luca before the man can speak. The wall completely explodes inward, showering the room in concrete shrapnel shrapnel and dust. Luca dives out of the blast radius, his combat instincts taking over instantly. The air fills with thick smoke as a monstrous silhouette steps through the shattered wall. A towering equation, a brutally evolved alien warrior, steps into the light, its reptilian eyes glowing with lethal intent. Luca stares up at the giant. The decoy's backup plan just arrived, and it isn't here to negotiate. The equation draws a massive, heavy spear, its muscles rippling under its thick, armored skin. Luca doesn't hesitate. He draws Ruina, the bone blade catching the dim light of the ruined parlor. The alien roars, swinging the spear in a devastating horizontal arc meant to cleave Luca in half. Luca drops low, the massive blade whistling inches above his head. He taunts the monster, challenging it to fight if it wants to protect its pathetic employer. The equation grins, fully intending to butcher the human intruder. Luca launches forward, utilizing his blinding omnidirectional mobility to close the distance instantly. He knows staying at range against a spear wielder is a death sentence. He must dive inside the guard. The alien thrusts the spear, predicting the charge with veteran combat instincts. Luca sidesteps the thrust entirely, leaving an afterimage as he rotates to the beast's blind spot. He brings Ruina down in a vicious diagonal strike, aiming to sever the alien's spear arm completely. The equation anticipated the counter. It drops its weapon and shifts its weight perfectly. The monster drives a massive fist forward, relying on raw, crushing physical power to overwhelm the assassin. Luca realizes he walked straight into a trap. The alien wanted him in close quarters combat. The massive fist collides with Luca's block, the kinetic force sending him skidding backward across the bloody floor. The equation assumes the human is dead, relying entirely on its bare hands to finish the job. Luca spins, using the backward momentum to launch a blinding counterslash. The bone blade cuts through the air, carving a deep, bloody trench across the alien's chest. The monster shrieks in pain, its perfect defense finally shattered by the Krathia-forged weapon. Luca grips the dagger tightly, his eyes devoid of any mercy. The fight has officially shifted in his favor. He drives the blade upward, aiming perfectly for the giant's exposed throat. The equation gasps, blood spraying violently as its vocal cords are instantly severed. Luca finishes the sequence with a clean, decapitating swing, ending the alien threat in a fountain of blood. The decoy watches in absolute horror. His invincible bodyguard was dismantled in under 10 seconds. Luca stands over the terrified man, his black coat dripping with alien blood. The decoy desperately offers to surrender everything to the Custodius if Luca just lets him live. Luca looks down at him, the final piece of the puzzle locking into place in his synthetic brain. He realizes exactly why Val ordered the assassination through Nemesis. It was an intentional trail. The Empire wanted Hylas to find the connection. A blinding flash of steel fills the room as Luca executes the decoy mid-sentence. The man's head hits the floor. The investigation ends right here. If Hylas continues to dig, he will walk straight into the royal family's trap. Luca finally understands the true depth of the conspiracy. The Emperor isn't just watching the Custodius. The royal family actively wants to provoke Hylas into treason, so they have a legal excuse to annihilate the entire family. Kinuan, the Phantom of the Empire, is the executioner waiting at the end of the trap. Luca stares at the carnage. Knowing this secret makes him a liability to the very people he serves. Pygon steps into the bloody room, unfazed by the mountain of corpses. The old man asks calmly if the target was neutralized. Luca lies smoothly, claiming they died in combat before spilling anything. He orders Pygon to finish burning the evidence while he secures the perimeter. Every trace of the Imperial Guard's presence must be turned to ash, or the noble families will use it to demand Hylas's head. Luca watches the flames consume the bodies, realizing the terrifying weight of his dual identity. He has successfully buried the evidence that would have triggered a civil war. Hours later, Luca returns to the pristine surface of the Imperial Guard Command Center. Hylas is waiting in his office, completely unaware of how close his family just came to total ruin. The commander looks exhausted. Covering up the unsanctioned raid required a massive expenditure of political capital. Hylas deployed an elderly disguise to mask his identity during the cleanup, but the toll is visible in his eyes. Luca delivers the fabricated report. He claims the investigation hit a complete dead end. Hylas stares out the window, quietly accepting the failure. The commander admits he suspects Nemesis was just a tool to put a leash on Vao's Akanan. He believes Kinuan is the one actively blocking the investigation to protect the Empire's secrets. Hylas vows to shift his focus entirely to hunting Kinuan. Luca's heart stops. Hylas is walking directly into the center of the crosshairs. As long as the commander fixates on the Phantom, the royal family will let the Custodias live. Luca walks out of the office, his loyalty completely fractured between his adoptive family and his absolute master. Weeks later, deep in the lower sector, the neon signs of the newly established G&G Industrial flicker to life. Gilda stands outside, practically screaming into a megaphone to attract customers to their grand opening. Jizzle watches from the shadows, fully embracing her new role as a black market cybernetics dealer. Luca visits the shop, finding the aristocratic noblewoman comfortably managing a crew of hardened thugs. She is installing military-grade implants into lower sector citizens, paying for the losses out of her own pocket just to gather raw operational data. She flashes him a genuine smile. For the first time, she is building something entirely her own. Luca realizes Giselle took his brutal advice to heart. She isn't a tool anymore. She is the one using others. He admits he is impressed. She successfully bypassed the suffocating bureaucracy of the upper sectors. Giselle pulls him aside, her tone shifting from proud business owner back to calculating noble. She drops a massive political favor in his lap. Ile Karthika has requested their presence at a high society gala. Ile's father is dying, and the succession war within the Karthika family is about to turn violently bloody. To protect himself from his own relatives, Ile needs a public display of absolute power. Giselle grins. Ile has invited her to attend the gala as his fake fiancé. A marriage alliance between the Karthikas and the Custorias would terrify any rival into submission. Luca sees the tactical brilliance of the move. It secures a massive political debt from a future family head. Giselle asks Luca to accompany her as her personal escort, knowing his presence will further solidify the threat. He agrees without hesitation. Protecting his sister is the one duty he refuses to compromise. Giselle smiles softly, relieved that despite all his cold logic, he is still the boy who promised to protect her. 1 week later, the towering crystal spire of the Karthika Tower pierces the sunset over the upper sector. The landing pad is packed with luxury transport ships dropping off the absolute elite of the empire. Inside the grand ballroom, hundreds of nobles mingle beneath impossibly massive crystal chandeliers. Giselle arrives, wearing a stunning white evening gown, practically radiating aristocratic authority. Luca walks beside her, dressed in a sharp black suit, his dark aura contrasting perfectly with the pristine environment. The elite nobles clear a path immediately, completely terrified of the youngest cadet to ever receive a cross-sword medal. Sycophants rush forward, desperately trying to flatter the famous Custoria assassin. Luca completely ignores them. Ile Karthika spots them and strides across the ballroom, his fake smile absolutely blinding. He takes Giselle's hand, playing the role of the devoted fiancé perfectly for the audience of vipers watching them. Luca glares at him, deeply annoyed by the theatrics. Suddenly, Enrico Lacan pushes through the crowd. The delusional noble has no memory of the hijacking incident. He spots Giselle and immediately tries to grab her, completely ignoring the two lethal operatives standing right next to her. Ile intercepts him smoothly, warning Enrico to back off his fiancé. Enrico throws a tantrum, whining that Ile promised to introduce him to a girl. Luca steps forward, grabbing Enrico by the collar with enough force to lift him entirely off the marble floor. The idiot screams in terror as Luca's killing intent physically crushes his composure. Blood pours from Enrico's nose, just from the sheer psychological pressure of Luca's aura. Luca casually drops him, suggesting he go find a girl through Martina's syndicate instead of bothering his sister. The surrounding nobles gasp, thoroughly horrified by the violent display of dominance. Giselle sighs, telling Luca he didn't need to go that far, though she clearly enjoyed watching the stalker suffer. Luca turns away, scanning the room. His synthetic eye catches a strange ripple in the decorative koi pond. He tracks the disturbance and freezes. Standing perfectly still in the center of the crowd is a girl with short purple hair. Ivan, the emperor of the Accretion Empire, disguised in a standard military uniform, radiating an overwhelming, suffocating presence. She looks directly at him, her red eyes locking onto his soul through the sea of oblivious nobles. Luca's blood runs entirely cold. The ultimate predator has entered the room. He tells Giselle he has urgent business and breaks away from the group immediately. He cuts through the crowd, his heart pounding against his ribs. You do not make the emperor wait. He approaches her carefully, dropping his head in a gesture of absolute submission. She smiles, deeply amused by how quickly the arrogant assassin falls in line. She leads him away from the main floor, the surrounding nobles subconsciously parting for her, without realizing why. They arrive in a secluded corridor. The playful tourist persona from the slums is completely gone. Yuri's voice drops into a chilling, commanding octave. You already know your mission, don't you? She projects her raw, monstrous aura, a massive spectral snake wrapping around Luca's mind. She demands absolute loyalty. From this moment on, he is not a Custoria. He is her weapon. Luca feels the crushing weight of her command. He nods, swearing his allegiance to the throne. Yuri steps back, satisfied. Before she leaves, she asks him one final, highly concerning question. Are you armed? Luca taps his coat, confirming he snuck a pistol past the security scanners. Yuri smiles viciously. You'd better get ready to fight. Before Luca can even process the warning, a massive shadow falls over the glass ceiling of the ballroom. A heavily armored gunship descends from the clouds, its searchlights blinding the terrified nobles below. Luca draws his weapon instantly, sprinting back toward the main hall where Giselle is trapped. The massive reinforced glass shatters inward as the terrorist dropship unleashes a torrential barrage of heavy artillery fire straight into the gala.